Unless you've been under a rock, the golfing industry is going heavily into training physical fitness. At the professional levels, it's obvious with people like Bryson DeChambeau and what he's done with his game and his development of speed and distance, as well as his size and time spent in the gym. And that seems to have a rippling effect on the rest of the industry, where golfers are now being treated more as athletes and less as just fragile people who go out and walk around a golf course for 4.5 hours. And this is even going into society and the average everyday golfer and everybody in between, just to have better enjoyment of life, play longer, be able to do things, get out and be active, and so forth. And my guest today is an expert in that field, has been helping golfers across the spectrum of all levels, from beginners all the way up to PGA Tour professionals, for quite some time. He has a degree where he started in his industry as a physical therapist. And he's a doctor of physical therapy, which for any of you know that requires quite an extensive education and training. He's Titleist Performance Institute certified golf fitness specialist. He is also a National Strength and Conditioning Association certified strength and conditioning coach. And he is the creator and owner of Guidry Golf and Sports in Mandeville, Louisiana, which is just outside of New Orleans. Now, if you haven't figured it out yet, his name is John Paul Guidry, or I should say Dr. John Paul Guidry, most commonly referred to as JP. And we have a very, very good conversation about all things training. As I mentioned, how the mantra or the thought process of golfers is being fragile and that they should only train in very high reps and low weight is not true and doesn't hold up to the data, at least in his mind and many others. We talk about speed training. Is does working out help protect golfers, or is it contributing to their injuries? What are the big exercises that he uses, as well as what are some of the fringe things that are coming out into the world, and do they stand up to the empirical data and evidence and real-world testing that he and a lot of his contemporaries like to focus on? So a very, very great talk, interesting. He's a great guy. For any of you who are looking to work with him, we'll have the link to his website and all his social media tags in there. Just reach out to him. I'm sure he's happy to help you. He's developing online ability to coach students, as well as if you're in the New Orleans area, please reach out to him. So, as always, sit back, relax, and give a big Golf 360 welcome to my guest today, Dr. John Paul Guidry. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This episode of the Golf 360 podcast is brought to you by Affinity Wealth Management Group. We all work exceptionally hard for our money, and none of us can afford to let that fall into the dark abyss of the big box financial service firms with their jack of all trades and master of none mantra, which basically means you become a number within a cookie cutter model, which is often accompanied by massive fees. Your future deserves more than average returns, and at Affinity Wealth Management, they ensure that your financial goals receive highly individualized, tailored attention from experts who are in the industry to be great and not average. As a client of Affinity Wealth, you will receive a customized solution to your customized life, keeping in mind your family's financial situation, values, and risk tolerance. Contact them today at 248-840-3863 or www.affinitywealthmg.com. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. All right, I am here with the doctor, J.P. Guidry from Guidry Golf and Sports Performance. Dr. Guidry, thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm a fan of your work. I've been following you, I think, for at least a couple years. One question I got for you is, as I was read some of your articles over that time, and I've been watching your posts. What do you have your swing speed up to now? Because I know you've been working on that and kind enough to share it with the masses.
So my playing speed is probably around 115-ish. The highest numbers I get out when I'm speed training, I get up around like low 120s, 120, 120, 122. That's kind of the highest I've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
I've got so golf is like a very second sport to me. I didn't pick up a club till I was 23, 24. So there's some mechanical issues in my swing that are more my limitation at this point than my physical ability. So I've been trying to spend more time on cleaning some of that stuff up lately.
Yeah, it is. When I was the other day, I was just reading through some of your older articles, and I say this because that's quite an improvement. As you were, I think your son was just born or recently born back in 2018, and you had a minor injury and were just getting back at it. And I think your swing was right in that 109 range, 106 range. So to get it up to that 115, 120, it just shows what can be done if you're doing the right things.
Yeah. So I was probably around at that time, close to 108-ish, maybe 110, somewhere in that area when I kind of started really focusing on getting my speed up. And I didn't make too much of a jump this off season, mostly just because I was spending more time trying to work on the swing itself. So it kind of, just like everything, it goes through its ups and downs. And when I focus on it more, it goes a little more up. And when I don't, it goes a little down. But, I've been able to, I train pretty consistently as far as in the gym. And, so mine pretty much goes up or down depending on how much time I'm spending on the speed training itself, the swing training.
And is that a function of, because you work, and we'll get into this a little bit later, that you work with a lot of different golfers and how to improve their body and efficient and increase speed and all those good things. Do you find that age becomes a factor in that maybe that if a younger person they can focus on speed and pick it up and it seems to stay a little longer, and then as we age it, you have to focus more on it, that it will have a tendency to drop if you neglect it?
I think so. I mean, yeah. So the younger you are, you can kind of not do some things and still get away with it, or maybe get away with it for a longer period of time versus the older you get, if you take off of working out or speed training or something like that, I think it tends to decline a little quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So again, part of like what I promote is even people when they have, let's say they can move the golf club, very fast in their 20s, and so a lot of times I'll hear, well, I already swing, 120. I don't need to work out. I don't need to do this. Part of the benefits of doing that is building that base so that when you're 30, 40, and 50, you've built a habit of, the fitness part and speed training part and whatever else, mobility. B, you're probably going to up that ceiling even higher. But more importantly is you're going to stay at your peak longer, and then you're going to slow that decline. That's going to happen to everybody with aging. part of what I try to do is minimize that decline. And then people that are older that maybe haven't done anything is obviously we can try to get some of that back, and definitely try to, fight back against the changes of Father Time.
Yeah, I'm a big Peter Attia fan, Dr. Peter Attia. I don't know if you
Mhm.
know him or follow him at all, but and his podcast, The Drive, and I don't know where I heard him. I mean, he said it a number of times, so it's not important where I heard it. But he said that the number one factor against aging that everybody can do is to go exercise. And to your point that you said you can slow. No, you can't stop it, right? I mean, once you're born, we're
Right.
all working in the same direction, unfortunately. But you can definitely slow it down.
Absolutely. And, and so again, the two big points are the earlier you can start, the longer you can maintain that physical peak. And then the slower that declines are going to be. But also, if you're getting a late start, let's say you're 40, 50, or even 60, and you've never touched a weight in your life, you can still reverse some of that and then continue to slow that for the next, 20, 30, 40 years or however long, you're able to stay on this side of the dirt. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's, there's a bunch of different quotes out there, that exercises is the closest thing we have to a magic pill, from a standpoint of, there's so many disease related factors that regular exercise and even you throw in healthy eating can combat, heart disease, diabetes, certain type of cancers, but even just things that tend to kill us when we get old, falls and frailty and inability to stay independent and function for ourselves, outside of the disease realm, that just simple strength training just keeps us able to take care of ourselves and do the things like play golf that we enjoy, well into our years.
Well, I mean, golf is only recently, more or less, focused on speed training in comparison to a sport like, well, pick any other one, really,
Yeah,
right? I
pretty
mean,
much.
you look at the NFL Combine; they're all they're doing is measuring speed and strength. I had Blake Austin on. He's a up and well, he's not even up and coming. He is a baseball hitting coach, and he was telling me the other day that baseball has trained for speed since the dawn of the game. Why do you think it is that golf is now so late to the game, and that it's only been recently in the modern era that there's been a focus on speed training?
Well, there's a bunch of myths that, even today still kind of hang around a little bit. There was always a thought that weight training would make you lose mobility, which has been disproven over and over again. And in fact, properly designed and performed weight training will, help you maintain and keep mobility, if not improve it. But that's kind of been the biggest myth as far as, like, let's say lifting weights, is everybody's had this idea of, oh, I need to be flexible and mobile for the golf swing, which, yeah, you need some of that for a healthy, safe, efficient, powerful golf swing. But you need the strength to create force. You need the strength to support that mobility from a health and longevity standpoint or an injury reduction standpoint. But, it's kind of just in the last, I'd say, I've been doing this. I've been a PT 15 years. I've been focusing on golf for a little over 10. And even when I got into golf, it was still you know, it was pretty big, a big myth that people believe that you don't weight train, you don't strength train because you're going to lose your flexibility. When we know now that, when done properly, it only benefits the golfer in performance and health and everything. So I'd say that's the biggest thing. There's always the older teachers that taught you, to swing slow and smooth and easy. And
Mm-hmm.
now we know, again, speed is a huge benefit to have, and swinging slow. I still run into golfers who get told that. It's a little more rare now, but swinging fast, learning how to control that speed, learning how to find the center of the face with that speed. But speed is always going to be an advantage, all other things being equal.
Yeah, I agree. As far as training for strength, it seems as I follow more guys in your field, whether they be therapists or trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, it seems that strength through length now is becoming very popular. At least the messaging or to the masses. So when somebody does strength training, would you recommend that it be in a full range of motion so that they are able to gain strength, mobility, and some flexibility all simultaneous?
Well, there's benefits to that, and there's benefits to not doing it. So, from a force generation standpoint, you really only need to train close to the range of motion your body works in the sport. So, again, the golf swing, we don't get anywhere close to a, what we call an ass to grass squat or a full squat
Mm-hmm.
from a movement and a force production standpoint. So, from pure force generation, doing things like half squats and quarter squats with heavier loads have more of a, kind of follows the law of specificity, which has more of a direct carryover to how we produce force in the golf swing. Now, I would still be a proponent of saying, if you're going to do those things, then you probably need to spend some time, even if it's just lighter weight or body weight, going through, taking your body through a full range of motion, or maybe your warm up sets, you do a few light warm up sets of full range. And then when you get into the heavy stuff, you can start to limit the range and focus more on speed or weight and that type of thing. But it's kind of understanding those things, that what's your goal? If your goal of the exercise is pure force production, then going through a full range of motion really doesn't give you any extra benefit. But if your goal of the exercise is maintaining mobility or improving mobility, then yeah, you need to push that range of motion. So I think you can take an exercise like the squat and you can utilize it in a bunch of different ways. You can load it heavy and make it pure strength and shorten the range. You can do it light and try to move the bar fast, and now it becomes more of a speed based exercise. Or you can do it, load it however you can and go through a full range of motion, and now it's a little kind of combination of strength and mobility.
What do you find? And I know everything because in your field, a lot of the people who I've had on the show, or at least talked to, and then in the golf swing as well, it seems to be that you don't prescribe anything until you measure, right? You got to find out where the limitations are, what they need to work on before you can go starting to ask them to do things that might end up hurting them. But how would you differentiate the speed or training for force and strength versus simply speed? Because there is I used to read a lot of this stuff, that the like, for example, in strength training, you've got the neural drives. Like if someone's trying to bench press 400 pounds and they're hardly moving the bar, the neural drive has gone through the roof, right? So it's firing as absolutely fast as it possibly can. But that doesn't necessarily build speed outside of neural speed. And then you obviously have the muscle speed factor. So how do you integrate both of those things when you're working with a golfer? Let's say a kid coming out of college, or they're a pro and they want to go to the next level, or anybody for that matter. How would you go about doing both of those?
So, yeah, I mean, again, there are certain tests that I think, depending on the golfer, if you're the weekend golfer, I don't do as in-depth of an assessment, because most of those people just need to start lifting weights, doing something. If you haven't been doing anything, I'm going to test for injury history and maybe some mobility tests, but strength and speed stuff, I don't really test till we get into the program. But for like your example of someone that's maybe a higher level, they're trying to play college or, make it professionally, then, we're going to test swing speed. That's the number that we're ultimately trying to move, and ball speed really, along with that. I'm going to maybe do some 3 to 5 rep max testing on, usually I'll do trap bar and bench press.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do a vertical jump testing. I have a jump mat, so I'm going to look at just what their vertical jump is, and then how long they're on the ground, as far as their rate of force development, how quick they move. I'll do a seated med ball chest pass test for maybe some upper body power. Something I'm trying to get into, still kind of trying to get it set up the best way to do it in my place here, but doing some med ball throw testing, so measuring with a radar gun. This is something Bill Miller, if you're not familiar with him, I'd highly recommend following him. But he's put out a lot of good stuff testing med ball throw speed, overhead throw speed, sit up and throw speed, things like that, where you're measuring more of that pure power, and then you're doing it with lighter and heavy med balls. So you're fine tuning. Now, again, this is all really, the more elite the athlete, the more in depth you're going to go in. Again, with my weekend warriors or club golfers, I'm generally not going to dive this far into it, because I don't really need to. They just need to start doing something.
Right. They probably have
the higher the level of the golfer, the more in depth you're going to test. But I do think in golf and in general in fitness and even medical as far as the rehab standpoint. I think we over test. I think we over analyze. And, a lot of times we're just gathering data for the sake of gathering data. And I don't even think we understand what that data means or if it even means anything at all. So, you look at things like the TPI screen and, FMS and all these other kind of screens that have been shown to not really have any correlation with injury reduction and things like that. If you understand how to use them, they're fine. They're good, just general quick movement tests just to see how somebody moves. But I don't score them from the standpoint of you got to get a 20 out of 20 before you can squat or something like this. I'm just getting an idea of how does this person move? What is their basic movement quality? How do they squat? How do they hinge? What's their rotational mobility as it relates to the golf swing, the thoracic spine, the hips, shoulders, neck. And that's pretty much it. And then if they have an injury or a surgery or injury history or pain, I'm going to dig deeper into that area. And then for most of my golfers, that's what I'm testing. Now, again, like my juniors or my higher level golfers will jump into, again, some jump testing, some med ball testing, things like that. But I try to consolidate it as much as I can. Ultimately, everybody, I'm testing swing and ball speed because that's really the number that matters.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see all these other numbers move really to do two things: to make sure they're staying healthy. So are they staying on the course? Are they playing without pain? Can they play and practice as much as they want without issue? And then is their swing speed going up? Is their ball speed going up? I may look at some things movement wise and how it relates to swing changes they're making. But again, even that gets a little dicey is, what are we really doing? Because, there's plenty of ways to kind of make your swing find the golf ball, that I think we can get too into the weeds with some of that stuff.
How would you, if one of your players has either stalled out on their speed development, how would you differentiate between if that's a force production issue or if it's a speed issue, or do you address both of them together?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at everything. We would kind of, because this is happening, and sometimes it's an overtraining issue or an under recovery issue.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client, I guess this was kind of last winter, and turned out he was doing like some extra stuff outside of my program I had for him, which happens from time to time. And he started plateauing and actually started going backwards with his speed, which is why I try to check swing speed pretty regularly so I can see if this is happening. And so I started digging deeper, and it come to find out he was just overtraining. So I just said, hey, look, here's what I think's happening. I want you to stick to the schedule. Don't do anything extra. And within like 2 to 3 weeks, his speeds were coming back up. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Are they resting properly? Are they, is there other stress in their life? Because, outside of the professional golfers, most of the people I work with are, the full-time jobs and their parents and husbands. And so there's other requirements that life throws at them. And so we need to make sure that we're balancing their program with changes in that. In the golf season, we don't want to do as much volume in the gym because they're making more swings. They're playing and practicing more. We don't want to overload them. So generally, when they hit a plateau, I'm usually digging there first. And then, we kind of clear things out, or maybe we make some changes there. Then I'm going to look at the program and say, okay, well, if we were more strength heavy, then, if they're available, I may retest them to see some things. If not, we may just start shifting to more speed-based training or speed-based volume in that, and less on the heavy strength training, because there is kind of a level of diminishing returns of, getting more strength, how much that is requiring from an energy and a time investment standpoint. And are we better off maybe just kind of maintaining that and spending more time moving fast, or vice versa, but generally it's kind of especially as we're coming in from all season to in season, we're starting to look at moving faster and not necessarily going as heavy or going as much volume in the strength category.
So how would you gear a player's program, as you mentioned, to go from out of season to in season, or you touched on that you're going to go from less volume, and I'm assuming that means less weights, and more into the speed aspect. How do you factor in the the wear and tear? In other words, if they're swinging more because they're in season, do you reduce the amount of rotational exercises they're doing?
I will, I will, change that to maybe where we're doing more anti-rotation stuff, or we're working in different planes. It's really just, I don't even necessarily say I don't go heavy.
Mm-hmm.
We just smarter about going heavy. We go heavy less, I'll say. The intent. So I try to keep the intensity up. We just keep the volume down. And that volume may be volume of rotational stuff. That may be volume of heavy lifts. That may be going from 5 sets of 5 to 3 sets of 5, but still going heavy, or whatever that may be. Again, there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways you can kind of go about
A
that.
lot of variables in play
Depends
there.
on, some of it just depends on where they're at, what their off season looks like. But that's kind of the biggest takeaway is we just shrink the volume. It may be one day less a week, shorter workouts, less sets, less reps, whatever that may be, less strength, more speed. But, I think a mistake people make is they totally kind of just throw out strength training in season. And then they come out the end of the season and they've lost so much strength, which will, lend itself to losses of speed and even potentially, more risk for injury. So I do think strength training needs to be a focus there. It's just, we're not doing as much of it. I still want to keep the intensity. We just want to make sure, we're not taxing the body as much from that, and so again, you talked about kind of that neural drive, and then, if you're every rep is 110% and you're trying to move this heavy weight, that's going to tax your body, your nervous system, your muscular system. So we may dial that down some, but, we're not throwing away strength training. We're not even, the percentages may go down a little bit, that type of thing. But, I'm not just going to go out and just do some light movements and maybe jump and that's it. I still want to get some kind of strength work in.
Yeah, and Michael Carroll, the trainer, he had a post about that last week, and Sasha McKenzie and Doc Sasha's coming on in a couple weeks. I had asked them if I fully understand it if you're going to train for speed because you're really taxing your nervous system if you're swinging as fast as you possibly can. And the question I had to them was on their recommendation. Do they recommend when they change the variable of load, do they go same weights and less reps and sets, or do they go lighter weights and keep the same number of reps and sets that they had been doing? And I know that's probably splitting hairs, especially to a lot of people who might not be in that field or have trained quite a bit. But I always found that interesting, especially as you guys are in that field and you're doing the program periodization for different players. I always find it curious to what experts are doing and what they're seeing based off if they might have done one with one student and one with another, if there was much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of it is person to person dependent. Obviously the tournament golfer, the true tournament golfer, like, you're going to look at tournament weeks versus non-tournament weeks. How you load it. You may be just, if it's your typical, let's say Thursday through Sunday, where they're competing, then Monday may be your heavy day. And then we kind of slowly kind of lower volume or even lower intensity, moving more fast as they get closer to, tournament rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously you're taking it in travel. I work with players that are on kind of mini tours. And so their travel's a lot different than your PGA Tour players. So, they're generally sitting in a car for, 6, 8, 10 hours driving to their next destination, staying in a hotel, probably on a less than comfortable bed. So, you have to, you're just taking all this stuff in, maybe they don't have, they don't have tour trucks with full gyms in it everywhere they go. So you kind of have to load when you can and work with what you got to some degree, so some of that is just limited by what they have access to. Most of my mini tour players, like if they, they'll have like a Anytime Fitness or kind of a global gym membership. So if there's one in the town, maybe they can get to that and we can do a lot more. But sometimes there's nothing, even they're staying at a motel that doesn't have a gym. So we're talking vans and trying to, get creative with ways we can still load them, on those weeks. So, when you get to that level, especially, really, outside of PGA Tour and maybe Korn Ferry now, you're really dealing with just, well, what do we have to work with?
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, sometimes you go to those smaller hotels and their gym is two treadmills and a universal machine from 1985.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's my job as a coach to say, okay, well, what do you have? All right, here's what we're going to do based on that. We're just going to get the best we can out of being able to still load them as much as we can with what they have access to, you know. And then, that's you're doing the best you can. So look, if we got access to a full gym, then great. That makes my job easier. But, depending on the level they're at, that's going to change maybe week to week.
If for people who kind of keep an eye on PGA Tour and what's happening out there, the some of the discussion about training right now, if we look at Bryson DeChambeau, because he's the poster person for speed training with what he's done, and he's done a phenomenal job with he and his whole team. But some of the talk seems to be revolving around is what he's doing, taking it to a whole nother level. Is that detrimental to his body in the long run, and is it causing some of the injuries that he's having now? And some of the counter argument seems to be, okay, well, golfers get injured or have injuries in general. Why would his training be thought to be a contributor to his physical injuries? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's everybody's go-to. Look, if a golf, that started with Tiger. He all his injuries got blamed for working out. Now you can look into what he did, running 20 miles and with
A
the
40
Navy
pound
SEALs.
weight,
And
yeah, with a
yeah,
vest on.
yeah. So I mean, he was doing some things that no good coach in his right mind would have a professional golfer doing. Look, that's part of what made him great is he was willing to push his body in all kind of ways. So, but he was the first real guy, let's say outside of Gary Player, that really made strength training and putting on muscle popular. And I'd say over his career, it did him well more good than harm. And I would say a lot of the things that got attributed to working out are misunderstood. Either it didn't really have anything to do with his working out. He's made hundreds of thousands of millions of golf swings since he was a toddler. Part of that takes a toll on your body. The number of swings, we look at rep management. All these golfers have made a bunch of swings doing
Mm-hmm.
an unnatural motion, we'll say. Part of that goes into it. It's the old argument of, well, Freddie Couples had probably one of the smoothest swings in golf, and he notoriously has had back problems most of his career. And so to say, well, it's Bryson's swinging fast and swinging with the intent he does is dangerous. Well, that's always my counter is, well, what about someone like Fred Couples, who also had back problems? And what we understand, especially back problems, there's so many factors involved, and it comes in all walks of life, and people that are extremely sedentary to people that are very active. It can happen to anybody. And there's things you can do to try to reduce those chances. And I would say, touching on Bryson, I would be willing to bet he did his research. So I don't think he did anything haphazardly that he wasn't fully confident he was minimizing his risk. Everything comes with risk. Every time you get out of bed, get in your car, you got a risk of dying in a car accident. Every time you swing a golf club, there's a risk something could get injured, just like any other sport. So, there's a minimal risk to everything we do, working out, sprinting, whatever it is, all these things that have high benefits to us. There's some risk to it. And I'm willing to bet Bryson did his research and knew that and did everything as close as possible to minimizing that risk. And he was the extreme. I don't know that I would recommend most golfers go do that level of it, but I think you can take pieces of what he did and understand, how to put that into, your lifestyle and your abilities. As far as his current injuries, I mean, I don't know enough about him to even comment on him, to be honest. And so, again, the best thing I can say is injuries happen. They happen to everybody. The things you can do to try to minimize them are, strength train consistently, number one. That's probably the biggest thing we have as far as injury reduction goes. You can maintain your mobility and make sure you move well. You can do your rep management and make sure you're slowly ramping up swings as you get from off season to in season, and
Mm-hmm.
slowly ramp up speed training. And we're not overdoing volume in any area, but you could do everything perfectly and still get injured.
Yeah, I mean, with all the ways to measure things nowadays, and all the data that's out there, it's still hard to tell what might be lingering in somebody's inside their body that if they're not getting on a MRI weekly, how are you supposed to know what's getting worn down based off of either genetics or DNA? Maybe they had an injury that they forgot about that they didn't tell you, and it's causing wear and tear. I mean, there's outside of doing something like that, I don't think there's a way that someone like you, as their strength coach and therapist, can identify every single thing that might come around the corner from their practice and training and everything else.
Yeah, and and then we have to separate pain from injury, because you can have pain and not have any physical tissue damage. So, this is where becomes a very complex subject. And just to touch on this idea of wear and tear, that's a whole nother area where I think there's a lot of misinformation in that. It goes back to, running is a big popular thing that people say, well, I need to quit running. It's wearing down my joints. But if you look at the data, unless you're an extreme runner, a marathon runner, there's really no evidence to show that running, let's say recreational running, puts more wear and tear in your joints than a sedentary person. In fact, there's plenty of health benefits that kind of outweigh that idea of being sedentary. So that's one example. But, the idea of wear and tear is, again, very multifactorial. There's genetics involved, there's your lifestyle, your job. There's probably digging into nutrition and things like that, things we probably don't even know about. So it's not as cut and dry as just saying, well, you've made a certain number of swings, or you've ran a certain number of miles, or because you're squatting heavy, or all these things are going to wear down your joints any earlier than if you just, sat on your ass for 20 years. So I think that, it's an excuse people can make to say, to not be active, or to kind of, to maybe look down upon certain type of physical activity. But, in the end, exercise activity is all going to be way beneficial than not, and you can be smart about it. You can be smart about speed training. You can be smart about practice and reps and things like that, and weight training and all these things, and do your best to mitigate, overtraining or overdoing it. But there's, just because you have pain doesn't mean you have an actual physical injury or damage. And you can have, pretty severe damage and not have any pain. So, it's not always a 1-to-1 ratio in that. And even if you look at things like MRIs and X-rays, there's plenty of studies showing people that have, for lack of better words, terrible looking backs on an X-ray or MRI that have zero pain. And then, I've had patients that could barely move around and had a beautiful MRI, nothing else. So, that's where this idea of pain and injury becomes so complex that it's hard. It's a hard thing to do. It's hard to treat.
Yeah, I tell a lot of students, I said, look, there's a big difference between science and the data and what we're able to produce and measure. But there's also the reality of them playing. And I give an example, like for club fitting, there's going to be recommendations based off of what input you're putting into whatever system you're using for measurement. So whether it's the flex they should have, if you do it in CPMs, cycles per minute, all these different factors. But if it feels terrible to them and they're not, and over the course of a week or two, they're not making the adjustment to it, well, then maybe the system that they use is wrong, or something's not adding up. So there's the scientific side, and then there's the real world side. And that's not to say that science isn't something that's needed. Especially after the last 2 years we've been in, people will sit there and argue different sciences, yeah. Right? But it's like, well, there's some things in the scientific world that they can't measure yet. So, correct. And in the golf world, there's some things that can't be measured. So there is, it's like whenever I do a club fitting with somebody or putter fitting, or whatever I'm doing with them, I'm like, okay, here's what the data says and here's what the science says you should be to, but let's go test it to make sure it actually works for you. And if we need to tweak it or modify it while you're here, we can still do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the whole, the art and science of coaching. That the art is that's that part, that's that kind of human element, or that feel element of, the data might say this, but, the person in front of you is feeling something different, or it's not working for them. And sometimes you got to make some changes, and as a coach, I think some of that just comes with experience of having enough people in front of you and seeing things,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding, well, if you look at club fitting, well, the data says this should be the best, combination of shaft and head or whatever for you. But if if the player doesn't like the look of it, that might be enough to say, well, this isn't going to work for me. I can't stand over a ball comfortably and look down at this. I don't care what the numbers say, type of deal.
Yeah, and probably the easiest one for most of the listeners out there, as far as a club fitting, for example, is if you take somebody who has a very soft transition and not a lot of downcock wrist hinge, even though I know some coaches out there are going to say there is no such thing as downcock, and that's an argument for another story. I'm just using it as an illustration.
Okay.
A soft wrist hinge or cock, like a Steve Stricker, right? He has
Gotcha.
very limited. And so players like that are going to tend to like a softer tip, more willowy play down at the bottom at impact. And then you have somebody like a Sergio Garcia who has obviously a very long lag, right? His wrists are really hinged coming to the ball. They're going to prefer a firmer tip because you don't want that tip kicking in there at the last second, because they're going to kick in at all different times because the hinge is so long. So they're going to have completely different load factors on their shaft. Well, if you were to put them on a launch machine and you try to fit Stricker off of using spin as a very high criteria, the chances of you putting him into a driver shaft that has a firm tip are very high, because it's going to bring down the spin on the launch machine. But the adverse effects on his swing could be detrimental. And I used to say this many years ago, because he was playing, I want to say it was Project X shafts, would have a very soft tip. Top 3/4 of the shaft is very stiff. And then he had the UST, the black and gold shaft, I can't remember, which had a really firm tip. And everybody used to sit there and wonder, like, how can Stricker be such a great wedge player, extremely good iron player, and sometimes he can hit the driver just as crooked as can be? And I'm like, well, it's simple. He's got the wrong shaft in his club. Oh, no, it matches all the numbers. I say, there's times when the numbers don't add up, right? And you could go vice versa. So that's hopefully that illustrates a little better to the people that are listening what you and I are talking about on data that you're getting, data I'm getting, might not be exactly what that person needs.
Yeah, and so I would, look, the same thing goes with exercise selection. So, I base my programs off the general basic movements: the squat, the hinge or deadlift, pressing, pulling, rows, pull-ups, chest press, shoulder presses, lunges, things like that.
The big five.
But yeah,
right?
But I'm not gonna, there's people I have that just don't tolerate a squat or don't tolerate, a deadlift. And so I'm going to maybe trying to find a variation that fits for them. But I'm not going to force something, even though I know this is a really good exercise. This may be the best exercise for lower body force production, but for them, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you have to say, okay, well, yeah, we're going to try these things because we know these things have the biggest carryover for whatever we're trying to work on. But if it doesn't work for them, it's painful, whatever, they just can't get the movement. We may still try to work that in down the road, but, you can't just kind of try to fit a square peg in a round hole, even though you think it should work because that's what's supposed to work. Same thing goes for like speed training. I don't necessarily prescribe speed training for all my clients all the time, especially early on, because most of them need to build that base up first. So I know speed training is an important part of gaining swing speed, but in my opinion, I think the weaker you are, the more mobility restrictions you have, it becomes more of a risky thing to do. And so, I may say, look, we're not doing any speed training outside of maybe when they're hitting balls, until you build a base, build some strength, maybe start moving a little better. So, there's things where whether you put it in at all or you don't put it in at certain times, even though we know, okay, these are the big things that move the needle. Again, that's that art of it.
Yeah, the experience that you have and the skill you developed, you know based off how that student is moving, that if you gave them speed training, they could run a higher risk of injuring themselves because they don't have a platform to shoot that off from. Right.
Yeah.
And what's the purpose of doing it then if the risk or the risk factor is amplified or increased exponentially?
Correct. So you're always, everything's a risk reward. So that's if you follow me on any social media, I'm very anti unstable surface training for a lot of reasons, but that's one of the big reasons is, I'm not going to put someone on surface that might make them fall, that isn't going to give them any benefit. I mean, that's the total opposite end of a risk reward, is that's all risk with very little to no reward,
Mm-hmm.
even though it looks cool on social media, and the vice versa would be like let's say a body weight squat or a light goblet squat where there's really no risk, very little risk, the reward might not be as great, but if they just need to learn to squat, then that's where we have to start, because I don't want to put them in a situation that may put them in more risk until I think they're ready for it.
Yeah, anyone that thinks that doing bench press with a ball under your shoulders is great must not have ever seen or ever had one of those balls burst, even if the ball is supposedly burst resistant while you're trying to push
Yeah,
up.
they still burst. They
Yeah, you're
still
trying to
burst.
put up
And
75-pound dumbbells in each hand, and that thing pops.
yeah.
And it's the scariest thing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not going to happen under my watch. I'm sure there's clients that have done stuff like that on their own, but I mean, I'm all for kind of trying new things and making things fun and maybe giving the client or the patient some things that they want or enjoy. But, at the end of the day, my number one job is to do no harm. And so I'm not going to put any client of mine in a situation that either is going to put them at physical risk, or at the very least, I think is just going to waste their time and money. I mean, they're paying me for a certain product. They're paying me to get better. They're paying me for the time. And so I'm not going to waste that time doing something, even if it's not necessarily physically risky, if I don't think it's going to benefit them. And I'll tell them that, and I'll say, look, if you want to go do this on your own, that's on you. Here's what I think about it. But in here, this is what we're going to focus on. Now, I may give them some things they like to do in the midst of that, or kind of meet in the middle. And that's part of, the process of the relationship. But in the end, I think it's, our number one job as a coach or a PT is to definitely not put our clients in a situation where they can be harmed, or at least doing everything we can to mitigate any risk that could be involved.
Right. Do you think there's a limit, as we're talking a little bit about speed and strength? Do you think there's a limit on what the body can handle as far as speed before it starts to have an adverse effect due to the torques and the shearing that the body goes through during a golf swing?
Yeah, I mean, I think tissues are going to have their limits. Now, I don't know that we can necessarily measure that. And I think, again, that's going to be person to person dependent based on a lot of factors. So I don't know that there's a number that you can put on it. You can look at a person or look at certain, aspects of them or their physical abilities and say, well, you shouldn't swing faster than this speed. I think as long as you're approaching things intelligently and making sure that as you're ramping up speed, you're maintaining strength and you're maintaining mobility, you're doing these things, you're not, doing too much volume, the body will kind of self-limit itself. And then if you hit a plateau, again, if you want to get more, then it's, the job to figure out, okay, what do we need to adjust to do that? But you still need to do it intelligently and safely. So I think, it's the old, story of the 4-minute mile or whatever, where, they said, it was humanly impossible to break it and, it would kill somebody to do it. And then, it's been broken hundreds of times since then,
Right.
And this, whatever the 60s or 50s, and I forget where, I've seen it a couple times, but basically I think it's the same principle. I don't think we know the limits of the human body. I think as we learn more, we learn how to break those limits intelligently. But, I don't think there's a generic limit. I think there's maybe limits at certain points in time that you want to try to force or not force. But, I'm always a fan of going after more as long as you do it the right way. As long as it's not taking away from something else. So if your goal is scoring, at a certain point, if it's eating into your practice time, as far as the skills of golf, of whatever you're working on, or your swing or your mechanics or whatever else may be hindering you from scoring better, then yeah, there may be a balance there where you're getting more speed isn't worthwhile if there's more important things to go after or bigger rocks to chip away at.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you kind of have to look at the whole picture there. Is what is the athlete's goals? If it's a long driver, then obviously more is better. Then you're just doing it safely because they just need to find the center of the face, one time and, do it very fast. So, if it's your weekend golfer, then you're just trying to balance out everything. You're trying to make sure they're doing things that are going to benefit their health So that's why I think the other aspect of strength training and exercise within not just doing the speed training is going to be a benefit, because it's going to benefit you in all aspects of life from a health and function standpoint. So you just have to look at, okay, what do you have? What time available do you have to commit to all these things? Is it worthwhile trying to get 10 more pounds on your deadlift, or trying to get 5 more miles an hour? Or is it going to take away from more important things? And that those more important things may be time with your family and kids, or, it may be being able to practice and play, or whatever that may be. Again, as a coach, and that's our job, to sit down with our clients and kind of figure that out, and just put it out there. Like, look, this is what it's going to take to get to this level. Can you commit to that? And is it going to hurt you somewhere else that might be more important?
I'd be very curious because I was in a little bit of a discussion, and I'm not a big Twitter fan because in the short amount of characters you have, I mean, it's hard enough in the written word to convey the message that you're trying to, and especially in today's world, without irritating the hell out of somebody. And there was a discussion on Twitter that I jumped into, probably shouldn't have, but it was about talent versus hard work. And one thing I said or asked was, okay, how is everyone defining talent? And the good response that I thought the best response was like, okay, God given ability and or physical attributes. I said, okay, then I would agree with that you can't change. Like Usain Bolt, right? The guy's got gifts that nobody else has.
An Olympic sprinter was probably born an Olympic sprinter.
Yes.
Now they worked at it along the way, so that's not to say they just walked into it. But look, I could work my ass off training to be a sprinter, and I'm never going to be anywhere close to that. I just don't have that fast twitch muscle like that. I don't, and so, I think that's how I would define talent: is what are your God-given physical abilities?
Yes, and David Epstein, I think, addressed a lot of that in his book Range and the Sports Gene. Where, I mean, that's basically what he focused on, or a lot of it on. And I argued the skill development was a lot of it. And of course, if you're a Dustin Johnson and you're practicing and developing skill, you have a distinct advantage. But I would be very curious to see, as far as speed development, and even maybe it would be easiest to test on the long drive competitors, would be the difference in muscle type that they have, 1 versus 2, and then the A, B, and C. And if there's a larger amount of them have a certain muscle type. Now, you're getting into the playing of golf, because it's 4 hours. Just having speed isn't going to do any good, because as you know, and anyone out there who study it, you also need endurance, and it's a different type of a muscle or muscle structure, or not even structure. What's the word I'm trying to say? Muscle. The fast twitch
like
versus slow
type,
twitch, right? Endurance muscles versus fast twitch. So golf is kind of an equalizer in that way. It's like, okay, you might have fast twitch muscles and you can hit it 5 miles, but we're going to play this game that takes 4 to 4.5 hours. So even though the swings only takes a half of a second,
I still would consider golf more of a sprint sport than an endurance sport, because the endurance level is so low.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're walking, you're standing, it's a long round. I would say it's probably more mental endurance than physical endurance.
Yes, 100%.
So from a muscle type standpoint, I think the guys with more natural fast twitch muscle from a just speed production standpoint are going to be at the higher end of that. You can train that and you can train into that, but your ceiling's going to be lower if you've got the marathon runner, muscle type or body versus a sprinter muscle type or body. So I think it's still a benefit to guys with fast twitch. So these are the guys that, you look at like a Jamie Sadlowski, or, someone that's 160 pounds that can, swing the golf club 140 mile an hour. I mean, there's a good chance that a lot of that is just genetics. Now, again, you got to work hard and train and find the center of the face and develop the skill of that. And he works hard in the gym. And so you maximize all that. I would put just Dustin Johnson on that end of things, of just natural athletic talent. I always say, I could take Dustin Johnson and have him stand on his head for an hour, 3 days a week, and stand as coach, and he's still going to be a pretty damn good golfer and probably hit the ball a long way. So that's not to take away from what he does in the gym, but it's just to say some people just have talent and they can get away with doing a lot less elsewhere. And so I would say golf is still more of a physically more of a speed-based sport. And the endurance, I would say, is more mentally than physically. I mean, you got to grind over a 4.5, 5 hour round and maintain your focus. You know, those guys walk, and especially you get to the college level and above. I mean, those guys are walking every time they practice and play. So their endurance is getting taken care of from a physical standpoint, from a system standpoint. So I think anything else outside of that needs to be focused on strength, speed, and mobility.
Especially in today's game, and there's a lot of discussion about that it's turning into more of a putting contest to win because everybody's just hitting it so far. They're wedging it out onto the green, and then it's like whoever puts the best. I know someone like Mark Brody and would argue that in his research it shows that you're hitting your irons or up, and even so much or so far as to say the middle and long irons is going to be more beneficial. But the length that it keeps increasing, I can understand the counter argument that says it's okay. You're hitting lower irons, and now you're hitting see who can putt better for the week, and that's going to be your winner.
Yeah, I mean, it all leads itself to the next level. So the longer you are off the tee, the closer you are to the green, the shorter iron you have in your hand, the more likely you are to be closer to the hole. The closer to the hole you are, the more likely you are to make the putt. So, I mean, again, you can look at the strokes gain stuff, and that's going to tell you something. But I think it still goes back to distance at each of those levels. But you still got to make the putt.
Mm-hmm.
But the argument always is, well, if you're having a one putt for par all the time, or make two putt from 60 feet because you can't get close to the hole, that's going to put a lot of stress on your putting game, even if you're a good putter. Versus if you're going driver wedge and having looks at birdie all day long, your odds of making putts still go up, even if you're not as good of a putter. So, I think there's a bunch of different ways you can kind of look at that data and all of that. But, from a standpoint of, I think, you got to be able to maintain that focus. You got to be able to, even if you look at putting, I mean, you got to be able to stay in your routine and maintain that focus at every aspect of the game, from, day one, shot one, to, day four, hole 72.
Absolutely. Do you think that today's sedentary society or culture is forward head posture with the texting and all that stuff is making it harder for people like yourself, or is it increasing your business?
Well, I mean, you could look at it both ways. I mean, definitely people just, their day-to-day lives don't require them to be as active. So, if they don't find ways to get active outside of that, which would be obviously part of what I do, then, that's going to have a negative impact on their health. So, definitely from a standpoint of people saying, well, I need help. I'm not, I'm going to work. I'm sitting, 80% of my golf clients are in sales or in business, or they're, let's say lawyers or something where they're generally behind a desk or in a car most of their day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the ones that recognize that and say, okay, well, I want to be a better golfer. I want to add more speed. I want to move better. I want to live a longer life. I want to be able to play with my kids or do the things I want to do. They're going to generally want to seek outside help because, they're not getting that activity on their own. And usually those people generally aren't the ones that are going to be as likely to get up, go to the gym themselves and stick to a consistent routine, at least to start with. So I'd say from that standpoint, it drives more business just because people are looking for more help. I think as a whole, I don't know that as society as a whole, we're as active as we should be. If you look at just the statistics of everything, and so that's, from that standpoint, it's just trying to continue to push the message, continue to dig, it's not an information issue anymore. Everybody knows that, being overweight, being inactive is unhealthy. It's just like, smoking. We got more than enough data to know that smoking is, extremely unhealthy for you, yet there's still a lot of people that still smoke. So at our day and age, it's not a lack of information. People at least know the things they're doing aren't the things they should be doing, or that there are things out there they should be doing to better their health. So it's digging deeper and figuring out why. What's stopping you from doing it? Is it perceived time? Is it energy? Is it fear of going to the gym? Is it not knowing necessarily what to do, even though you know you need to do it? And that's part of my job as a coach, or especially dealing with the general public, is to kind of dig into those areas so that you can start getting people to ask questions and kind of look inside themselves of, why am I not doing this? I know I need to do it. I want to be a healthier father. I want to be a better golfer. I want to play better. I want to hit the ball farther. A lot of people want those things, but they either don't do or don't know what to do, or they, most of them know an idea of what to do, maybe not the details, but they don't do it. And then it's figuring out, well, why aren't you doing it if you know it's what you need to do? I have people come up to me all the time, man, I need to come see you. And I've got this back pain. I want more swing speed. And then I never hear from them again. So, it's the old, I mean, they know it, they say it, they admit it, but what's keeping you from actually taking that action to doing it?
Yeah, they either fall back into comfort or
Yeah. It's habits, it's
right.
comfort,
Yeah.
it's all of that stuff that you've done it a certain way for a long time. So it's easy to keep doing that.
Or the issue that they're wanting to fix goes away for a very short time, and then I don't have to go do that, and then here we come, 6 weeks later, and they either have a back flare up, or they're hitting it short again, or they're in my instance they're hitting it crooked, and then they go through the whole cycle. It's like I can save you a lot of mental anguish. Just you don't have to jump in the deep end, but get in the pool.
Yeah. There's fear, there's fear of doing anything new, fear of change, even if it's good change. And I think, you've got to, for them, it's got to be a big enough pain point to want to change, and that could be actual pain, just severe enough pain to say, I don't want to be in pain. Or it could just be, I'm so tired of being short or hitting it crooked or being fat that I'm finally going to make a change. And sometimes, conversations I have with people, especially when they're inquiring about my services, or maybe we're hopping on what I offer free discovery calls. So people just call and I kind of learn about them and tell them about what I do. Part of that is figuring out, well, how big of a problem is this? Is this worth making these sacrifices of changing up your habits in your life and taking time from something so you can work out 3 times a week or whatever that may be? I mean, it's in their head, it's got to be a big enough problem to say, yeah, that's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though from the outside, you may say, well, you're 100 pounds overweight. That should be a big enough problem. You've just got diagnosed with diabetes or heart disease. But, one of the most eye-opening things I did was I worked home health physical therapy for a couple of years. And, I was seeing these people that were in their 50s and 60s that couldn't take care of themselves, that have been diagnosed with all these things, and that were just, a lot of these issues weren't, there were some that were disease related, and sometimes we'll say incurable disease related, certain cancers and Parkinson's and things like that. But some of this was just a big portion of it was just inactive people that it just snowballed. And then now they're 100, 200 pounds overweight. They can't get up. They're weak. They can't function. And so, it was always hard for me to kind of envision getting to that point, and so trying to be empathetic of saying, okay, what got you here? Okay, you're here. What can we do to get you on the road, the right direction? But, and none of these people were stupid. They didn't say, well, I didn't realize, I didn't know this was unhealthy for me. It was just a lack of, for whatever reason, inability to make those changes.
Yeah, and from what I see with people like that is, it's like that old saying, would you rather have $1 million or a penny a day doubled for a month? And I think the penny a day double comes out to like 1.7 million or something, more than $1 million. So everybody out there can go get your calculators and write it down and go figure it out. But and I use that example because it's like it's so subtle that they don't really know what they're doing, and pretty soon it's a year, then it's 5 years and 10 years, and it's such an ingrained habit that the physical effect that is, or the toll that it has taken on them isn't even realized because it has come on so slowly. But you're right, it gets to a point that it's like, okay, here's your options. You go this way, where that path ends. You go this way, and you got at least a fighting chance to live a active life. You can golf, you can play your grandkids, your kids, whatever. Go biking with your spouse, vacations, anything like that. But it's not easy, and the older you get, the harder it becomes.
Yeah, it's not, and a lot of times these people, people get wrote off as lazy, and and I think that's a bit of a cop out. I mean, some people may just literally be lazy, but I think for the most part, it's just change is hard. Change is hard. Changing habits is a very hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, quitting smoking is very hard to do when you've smoked for 30 years, and some of it is the addictive part, but some of it's just the habit of having that cigarette every morning or every, break or every whatever. And you've done it enough where that just becomes your life. And so the beauty of it is if you build good habits, it's once you get them, it's easier to stick to them. But changing someone that from a sedentary lifestyle into, all of a sudden eating better and exercising 3 days a week and doing these things is a process. It's not as simple as, social media kind of clouds us up as saying, well, just do this. And sometimes I'm guilty of saying that, kind of putting it out there like that. But it's, for me, when I'm working with someone in that case, it's let's just do something, stand up out of your chair 10 times, 2 to 3 times a day. Let's start there. Let's pick one meal and maybe try to make it a little healthier instead of trying to overhaul your diet in one week. Let's, add this one thing to your bedtime routine to hopefully help you get to bed a little better or sleep a little better, whatever that may be. We tend to kind of, everything looks so easy nowadays on social media and it's just to do this, and it's just not easy. I mean, I've been training my whole life more or less and working out, and there's still plenty of weeks where I get off or days that I don't motivate myself to get up and do it and miss a workout. And so, if I can do that, then someone that's never worked out, it's easy for them not to do it. So I think, that's the tough part of it. When you're in the trenches in the real world is understanding, okay, what can I do just to get them to do something different? And then let's build that one habit and let's start to add on to that, whether it's expanding that or adding another habit in. But it's got to be doable. And that's going to be different from everybody depending on where they're at, but it's got to be reasonably doable.
I saw one that went so far as to just tell the client, look, just show up here. And it was I'm pretty sure it was a trainer. He said, just show up and give me 5 minutes every day.
Uh-huh.
That was it. And the guy said, that's all. He said, just 5 minutes, because I want to make it so that it's the easiest thing in the world just for you to get here. And that's where we're going to start. I mean, they did a regression instead of coming for an hour, just give me 5 minutes, just show up. That's the first step.
Yeah. I mean, that's in a good coach, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, I read it once a year. It's probably my favorite book. And I think he has a quote similar to that in it. But you got to change habits. You got to build the habits, and you got to make them attainable to start, or they won't happen. If you tell someone that hates broccoli, you need to eat broccoli 3 times a day, they're not going to change their diet. They're not going to stick to that. So, you got to learn the person. You got to meet them where they're at and say, okay, let's come a little bit this way. Let's change one meal. Let's for dinner, let's just maybe pick at one healthier choice or pick a healthy protein and start with that. For, again, a workout, let's start with 5-10 minutes a day, doing something you can do that's attainable for you. And then, let's do that for a couple weeks and build a habit. Then let's add another exercise or add another day or whatever that may be. And again, that's that art of coaching is you got to understand where people are coming to you at. You got to understand their lifestyle, their schedule, what priorities they have outside of that and how to fit all this in to ultimately give them the success they want.
Did you see Jeff Pelizzaro's when he did the 40-day forged?
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I tell you, I was really impressed when what did he get to, like the 23rd day or something and missed and started all over again?
Yeah. So I actually committed to doing that. And I think about day 5, the no alcohol thing got me out. But hopefully Jeff doesn't hear this. But so the good thing about it is that, like, I built a little morning routine around some of the stuff, the cold showers and going for, so I've added in. Part of the positives I took for that is I've started to add in 2 15-minute walks a day, and that's something I kind of started with doing that. So, I think, again, even if you're not perfect, if you look at the 40-day forge, I might have did that at 60%, but I took away 1 or 2, 2 or 3 good habits that are now habits for me. So I think there's an important lesson there that, yeah, you know, and that Jeff had talked about this multiple times, that you don't have to be, you're not going to be perfect. You know, if Jeff is not going to be perfect, then, you know, 99% of the other guys doing it aren't going to be perfect. And so, you know, I think that even if you look at things, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to hit every workout. You don't have to eat every meal perfectly. It's just about building some good habits and then continuing to build on that. You know, I should have known going into it I wasn't going to stick to the no alcohol. You know, I told myself, and my birthday, you started in January. My birthday is January 9th, so
Oh
I
yeah, that
made it
was
till
bad.
I
There's
made
no
it till
way.
like the Friday before my birthday, which was like the 7th or 8th. So
You had no shot. I mean, don't beat yourself
yeah,
too bad. How did you
yeah.
like the
So
cold showers?
you know, it's something I've done before. I mean, you know, I don't really dig into the science of it. For me, it just wakes me up better, so I feel a little better doing it. I don't, you know, I mean, there's some science of different things that it may or may not do for you. And, you know, I don't think there's enough information out there to kind of prove a lot of that yet. But I mean, you know, if you, I would always look, I tell people, if you just hate this, don't do it. You know, it's not like saving your life. You know, that part of it is so minuscule. Stuff like that. It's like, look, if you like it, for me, it feels like it wakes me up better. So I'll do it, but I get away from it and come back to it. You know, but if I say, you know, if I recommend it to a client, they're just like, man, I hate doing this. And I'm just say don't do it, because chances are they're not going to do it anyway, and they're probably not going to do any of the rest of their routine that would benefit
Hmm.
them. And so, you know, there are certain things that are higher priority. Let's say strength training 3 times a week, or certain things like that. That yeah, I mean, you really need to find a way to do these things. But these other things that may benefit one person, not the other, but aren't going to move the needle as much health wise or goal wise, you know, take them or leave them. You know, I think we can overload ourselves. You know, you get on YouTube and you watch, you know, the millionaire's morning routine, and there's 1,000 videos like that, and they're fine, you know, but pick and choose one. You know, and I've done this myself. In fact, I kind of recently redid my morning routine because I just overloaded it to the point where I wasn't doing anything because it was too much stuff. You know, so sometimes, you know, you have to be realistic and say, look, I can give myself 30 minutes every morning. What are the main things for me that are going to move the needle the most? And I'm going to make sure I get those, you know. And so for me, it's I get up, I immediately go for a walk, I come in, take a cold shower, and I do a few kind of mental health things. And then I'm usually going to the gym and doing my gym workout first thing in the morning. And so I've kind of narrowed it down to that, but I had, you know, 4 or 5 other things that I was throwing in there that were like, you know, I didn't really want to do, or, you know, I wouldn't get anything out of. And so I think, you know, some of the times just less is more when it comes to, you know, health and fitness and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's similar to when people get in the gym and that first time really. And I've been going through this with my dad that he I mean he just turned 79 and he goes in and out of doing anything physical. And I've told him a million times. I said, look, when you get started, do half of what you think you can do, or just don't get to a point where you say, oh, I'm doing this a lot. I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was, because when the soreness kicks in a couple days, you're not going to be able to do it consistently. And when you're getting started, that's the most important thing, right? You
Yeah, I
don't want
mean,
anything to derail you.
correct. You know, you know, the biggest thing I tell my clients is I'm trying to eliminate as many barriers between you and doing this consistently as possible in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So, schedule wise, time wise, what exercise we do, you know, my number one goal is let's build the habit, and then we can optimize. And then especially for people that aren't doing anything, you know, clients that come to me that are already training or maybe higher level, and we're maybe jumping in a little deeper. But for most of my clients that are either haven't worked out or haven't done anything in a long time, you know, I'm trying to figure out how can I make this as easy as possible for them to do it. And then we could start to optimize, well, how can we make it better and better for their goals? But, you know, in the end, the best laid out program that, you know, if it's not done, it's worthless. So, you know, you have to kind of learn to read people and ask the questions and figure out right now, today, what is our best scenario for getting you to do this consistently? And let's start there. You know, and sometimes, you know, look, my last Friday is my deadlift day, and I had some things pop out, and I had about 20 minutes to work out, so I literally just did a little warm up and deadlifted, and there were other things I wanted to do, but you know, sometimes that would be me saying, well, I'm not going to work out at all because I can't do the full workout. So I think you kind of have to look at it, things like that, and make adjustments. Part of this process is being able to self-correct and make adjustments on the fly. And that may be you're at a gym and your squat rack's taken, there's no squat racks open. Well, part of what I want to, people that I work with to get out of this is understanding, well, how to make a quick, all right, I'm going to do split squats today, or I'm going to do goblet squats, or maybe I'll do something else and try to get the squats later, instead of just kind of, you know, quitting and going home, or,
Yeah, you might actually learn something,
yeah,
right?
I was supposed to work out for 45 minutes and now I only have 20 minutes. I'm not going to work out. Well, instead of doing that, saying, all right, I'm going to go in and get the main things done. I'm going to do something. Or maybe at home. Look, I can't get to the gym. My kids were supposed to, my wife was supposed to watch the kids and she had to leave. Okay, well, I can do push-ups at home. I can do lunges at home. I can get the kids involved, whatever that may be. And part of that is when I work with clients, they have that access to me to agree to kind of bounce questions off of me. But, I think in the end, I want them to have that ability, because I'm not going to, they're not going to be with me forever. And I want these things to be lifelong changes. So, part of that is learning how it's never going to be a straight, perfect line. Every workout's never going to be perfect. In fact, more are probably going to be imperfect than not. And so it's adjusting and learning how to get in and get the priorities done and get some work. And at the very least, just move your body and move some weight and get your heart rate up, even if it's a very imperfect way about doing it.
I've got an ice bath that I makeshift that I made. It's a 100-gallon feed container, and then
Uh-huh.
I've got a fountain pump that you can get at Lowe's that you would put in a fountain in your front yard just to keep the water circulating so it doesn't get stagnant. And then
Yeah.
I've got a fish tank thermometer in there, and then I usually put about a tablespoon of chlorine in when I fill it. So I'll depending on how much I use it and what time of year it is. In the winter I might only have to change out the water once a month because I'm not getting in there after I'm sweating. After a full hour or so workout. But it is definitely for something like that to where it's going to really be a jolt to your system. You've got to want to do it. And
Yeah.
what got
If
up
you hate that, it doesn't matter how much I tell you you need to do it. You're probably
exactly?
not going to do it.
Now it is interesting because some people will do it for health. I had there's a company Morosco Forge. They're like the Rolls Royces of ice baths, and they're out in Arizona. And I had their CEO on, and he actually part of his reason for doing it was health reasons. That he had a scare with his elevated PSA, changed his diet and did the ice baths for a year, and he did his ice baths pre-workout. He's a doctor of, I think, either sustainable energy or city sustain. I can't remember exactly. He's a professor, and he was doing some research and found some Japanese studies that said if you do it after your workout, you could lower testosterone, all these different things. So he started doing it pre-workout, and his testosterone, and I think it was a year later, went from 700 to 1200, and his PSA went from like 7 to 2. Now whether that was anecdotal or just for him, who knows? But I think that they're trying to figure that out. But there are some health benefits from it. But again, you've got that's something you got to really want to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are things that are obviously that's an extreme thing, and again, uh, if it works for you, do it. But, I would say like, there, even if there was tons of evidence showing all these benefits, if you hate it, you're probably still not going to do
Right, like
that.
it's the broccoli
You're not
analogy.
consider. Yeah, I mean that's just it's a very uncomfortable thing to do, and some of it, the benefits is that getting used to being uncomfortable and maybe getting used to breathing and kind of controlling some of the nervous system's reactions to that, from a, whatever mental health or whatever health, part of that aspect outside of, whatever, you know, testosterone levels or other levels may change or things like that, that may or may not come out all of this. There's some studies on palm cooling. There's some devices where you basically hold it in your hand. It supposedly lowers your body temperature through your palms, and that's
Mm-hmm.
been shown to improve, training and endurance and results from training. And so, again, all this is new data, and that's the problem with science is it takes a long time for science to really have enough evidence to show something. But, things like that, if it's low risk to you and you enjoy it, then I'm all for it. But let's not let's not put it ahead of the things we know that work. So if
Right.
all you're doing is, not that anybody's probably doing this, but if all you're doing is just doing ice baths and you're not doing other things that are going to be more important to your health, eating right or working out, then it's probably, a moot point at that point. There's supplementary to the training and the other the other things that we know benefit you, that, okay, if you like it, hey, maybe there's some benefits. Maybe we'll learn down the road there's even more benefits and it'll become more of a priority. But if you hate it, then don't stress over it. That's more the issue is like, don't, people kind of fret like, oh shit, I really need to do this ice bath, but I hate it and I'm not doing it. And then it becomes this thing where you got anxiety over not doing it. That's where I think it can become an issue when you're trying to force things like that.
Oh, I can speak from experience. The anxiety on the ice bath is the 5 minutes leading into it, and then the
Yeah, I
five
mean,
seconds
yeah.
before you get in is worse. I can say it's worse than when you get in, and it's colder than hell.
Yeah, I mean, look, our brains are wired to keep us safe, so it's going to make it seem way worse than it is because you don't want to do it. So, I mean, that's how a lot of situations are, and so again, that maybe there's some benefit to that of kind of going through that process and kind of showing yourself like this isn't that bad, and if you do it enough and kind of learning how to control heart rate and breathing and all these things in that situation, which can maybe carry over into other anxiety driven situations that you may find in life. So, I'm sure there's probably a litany of benefits, some may be bigger than others, but, uh, I think, again, it just comes down to if try it. As far as I know, I don't think it's harmful. If you're not sure, ask your doctor about it. But, uh, you know, like I said, I go through periods where I'll do it, 4 or 6 weeks. I'll do cold showers and then I kind of get away from it and I get back. And so, I haven't really noticed a huge difference one way or the other. I do feel maybe a little more alert immediately after the cold shower. I do kind of like the ability to kind of get control over my body in that situation, but it's obviously not been important enough to me that I've done it every day for, years and years.
Did you ever see the video of Tony Robbins with his plunge pool?
No, I can't say I have.
I don't even remember where I saw it. I think someone did a story on him for a magazine, and they had some videos of it online. And in his yard, I think he lives in Florida. He's got he's like 6'7". He's a big dude.
Yeah.
He's got a pool. I think it's on the side of his yard. That's like a 4-foot square, but it's about 8 or 9 feet deep. And I think he keeps it at like 45 degrees. And first thing he does in the morning, gets out, goes down there, jumps in. And he says he basically jumps in and then jumps out. And he said that the shock to his system for him puts everything, like, wakes it up right there, boom, and then he's off and running for his day. So to your point, everybody's different, but that's a very interesting way to get your morning going, jumping into a pool of water that's 45 degrees.
Yeah, look, hey, good for him. It works for him. If everybody had the money and time to do those things, then that would
Mm-hmm.
be great. But, so I think, again, that's where you have to kind of take a lot of things like people like that do with a little bit of a grain of salt because, he's got probably more freedom and time than money than most people I'm going to work with. So, you know, uh, doing something like that into their routine is going to come way down the line once we've built the habits of training and eating better and that type of thing.
What are change the topic a little bit? What are some of the things that you see in your industry in particular? And we touched on it a little bit earlier with people balancing on balls and all that crazy shit. What are some of the things that you see, given your expertise and everything else that you've done and experience, that others are doing that just make you shake your head or roll your eyes?
I think, look, the basics work. The basics have worked for a long time. We've kind of learned how to optimize certain things. And there's still things like even in America we don't do as well as maybe some other foreign countries when it comes to high level athletes and training and things like that. I think obviously social media has clouded a lot of this stuff that, everybody wants to have the new thing and I had this one secret that the fitness, world doesn't know of, which is kind of the biggest red flag out there. If somebody's saying that, I know this one thing, there's only one way to do this thing, one way to move, type of thing, this kind of circus tricks, if an exercise involves, 7 pieces of equipment and, specialized training, then it's probably not that good of an exercise for you, even though it looks cool on social media. So I think a lot of it's just driven from, that, people worried more about getting likes and kind of winning social media than actually, putting good shit out there and educating people. And, look, squatting, deadlifting, lunging, bench pressing, shoulder pressing, pull-ups, rows. I mean, they're not sexy, they're boring, but they work, and it's always worked. And if you program correctly, it's going to always continue to work. And so doing that consistently over a long period of time is what works, and my job as a coach is to figure out how do I fit that into someone's lifestyle and program and abilities, and what variations to use, and maybe what accessories to sprinkle in with that. But in the end, those things work. Those are the things that get you stronger. You want to move faster? Well, you got to move faster. You got to swing fast. You got to sprint. You got to jump and throw. You got to, move your body with high intent. And so, there's no real secrets to that. If you want more mobility, well, you got to push the ranges of your mobility, and so we tend to overcomplicate things, or we tend to kind of try to sell things that don't really work because they look cool or they sound cool, or, I've got this new thing that nobody else knows, and, you got to squat like this or move like this. And, just the reality is there's a lot of, there's a lot of bullshit artists and snake oil salesmen in this field, and look, you can have a high school degree and go take a weekend online certification course and spend some money and take some bullshit tests, and now you're a personal trainer and you're on the same level as everybody else, and you can be a really great marketer. And not to say marketing and sales is bad, because I think, we kind of, in fitness, especially in medicine, we've kind of been afraid of that. But look, if you want to help people, you got to get in front of them. I think the message is what can be bad or good. And I think that's where, what pisses me off and maybe gets me in a little trouble on Twitter at times is being outspoken against that. But I mean, like, I feel my job is obviously to help the person in front of me, the people that are paying me money. But, I can't just put my head down and ignore the shit that's put out there and to the public that are eating that up and saying, well, this must be the way to do it. I got to do what Alvin Kamara does and stand on a Bosu ball and catch boomerangs or whatever, or, do push-ups on a Swiss ball, or all these things, that people put out there. And, Jameis Winston sit on a Swiss ball getting.
Oh, I saw that the other day.
Football. So, I mean, that's
amazing.
But, look, if you're a kid that wants to play quarterback in the NFL and you see that, or maybe you're a young trainer and you see, look, wow, these guys are working with professional athletes. This must be what I need to do with my athletes. That's where it becomes a problem in my eyes. And look, that may be 5% of Jameis's program, and everything else may be solid. But the reality is you put that out there with zero context or zero other evidence of the good stuff you're doing, then I'm just going to assume that you're not doing it. And that's the problem there, is at least if you're going to put it out there, say, hey, we were having fun the last 5 minutes of training after we did our squats, our lunges, our jumps, or whatever, that's okay. I mean, that's still, I think it's still a waste of time. But look, at least someone seeing that without the knowledge can understand, okay, this is not really what you need to be doing. These are the main things that move the needle. They're just having some fun, or maybe, Jameis wanted to do those things. He wanted to put it out there for his social media to grow it. And that's all, fine. But if there's no context around it, or if that's all they're doing, then that's a problem. And so I think part of our job, if you're a good coach, now that we have this access to people through social media, the good side of it is we have the ability to touch way more people than we ever would be able to. And we have the ability to, for me, deliver training through an app to, clients all over the world, that 10 years ago, I never would have even thought would have been a possibility. So, I think it's our responsibility then to be a little bit of the police of the fitness field, and at least from an educational standpoint, say, look, this is wrong. This is not what you should be doing. I could probably do better about how I go about doing that, but, and how you word things. But I think it's still our job to educate the public in general, outside of the people that are standing in front of us.
Yeah, I agree with you that when they have a post like that they should Give it some context, and if that was something that was just done for fun, say, hey, here's the training program that we
Yeah,
implemented,
look,
and
I'd
then
be perfectly fine with that. If they did that, I probably wouldn't say anything, but they don't. And I've yet to see it, in any, you look at, the videos of Justin Thomas doing stuff or whoever, in the golf world, it's the same thing, I've yet to see one shared with any context, or the context that was shared with it was, the bullshit, oh, we're improving his balance or doing this and that, which we know doesn't carry over to the golf swing. Balance training on an unstable surface doesn't carry over to performance on a stable surface. Not to mention it reduces force production and changes motor patterns and does all these things that we don't really want out of training for that sport. That it's either that context or it's no context at all. So that's where I'm gonna, good, bad, or otherwise, whether I should or shouldn't, probably gonna call that out more times than not.
what are some of the things that you've been doing that you've seen some really good success with your golfers or people that you've trained in general?
So I mean, look, I still build it around the basics. For me, I'm I learn from guys in the field. People like Jeff Pellizzaro, like Mike Carroll, William Whalen of Performing Through. I'm sure I'm going to forget a lot of names here. Bill Miller. I've learned a lot. His book Swing Fast has been huge for me, and kind of learn how to program for speed, and maybe do some more in-depth testing for speed. There's a lot of solid coaches out there, and even learning from what the long drivers do, how they train their swing. That's a lot of what Bryson took is, increasing the length and speed of the backswing and getting taller through the trail leg and doing certain things that they do. They do at an extreme level because their goal is speed. So I think if you still want to control the ball, you maybe take a part of that. So those are things I've taken from learning that, looking at Sasha McKenzie and looking at the stack system and the stuff they put behind that, and how I kind of program speed training. Some of my clients, I push the stack system. Not everybody can afford it or wants to make that investment. So maybe they have super speed or they have some other tools that we'll utilize, and stuff I've learned from the research and data they've put into how they program that, I've taken and putting into how I program speed training. And so it's really, I mean, I keep it simple. Dan John is probably my biggest mentor, and we focus around the basic movements, the squat, the hinge, the push, the pull, carries. We get strong on that, double and single leg versions, double and single arm versions of those. When I train the core, I train it heavy. I train it to move through a full range of motion, loaded and unloaded, and then I train it to resist motion, heavy loaded. I think, everything gets, everything nowadays is core training, but I think, our core needs to be able to resist motion, isometrics, pal-off presses, things like that in different ranges, in different directions, in different planes. And then our body, our core and our trunk needs to create motion and move through a full range, flexion, extension, rotation, side bending. And so we need to be able to load it. We need to be able to do it unloaded, and then we can lightly load that safely and build some tolerance to that, so that when stress is put on our body in those, especially in maybe the extreme points of those range, we're more likely to be able to handle that stress without injury or without serious injury.
Mm-hmm.
And then, basic mobility. You got to be able to rotate through your hips, your thoracic spine, your shoulders, your neck, ankle mobility, and then just general health. Can you get up and down off the ground? Again, can you perform a full squat, at least body weight? Can you, can you touch your toes, or can you hinge properly? More importantly, those are things that I'm going to look at just from a general, let's say, functional standpoint with everybody I work with.
Seems to be working pretty good.
I've had a lot of success. And look, I'm still learning. I don't know it all. I'm confident in what I do know, but I still learn from people that have been around for me, that are doing the research, that have been in the field longer than me, that are, maybe more experts than me in certain things. And so, it's a constant pursuit. And I think if you're not, as a coach, if you're not constantly questioning what you're doing enough to at least look out there and say, okay, what's going on? And then, use your knowledge, use the scientific evidence, use the information we have to say, kind of put your bullshit meter on and say, well, what is this? Okay, well, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm not even going to pay attention to it. Or, oh, look, this guy's respectable. There's some data behind this. Um, whatever that may be, he's got a lot of experience. I respect him in the field. I'm going to look more into this, or maybe try to put some of this and see how it works with my clients. I think as a coach, you've got to always be trying to looking to improve yourself and improve what you do for your clients, and constantly learn. The basics work. The basics will always work, but doesn't mean we can't fine tune how we utilize that and find other things that we can throw into that to maximize, whether it be speed or health or injury reduction or whatever.
And Ben, you're down in Louisiana. Have you seen the material of the guys from GOTA?
Oh, we're gonna. All right, well, let's go here. Yeah.
And I asked that because I had them on the show. I haven't. I don't know if you agree or disagree. They were on a while back, and it seems to be. It's very interesting to me as someone who's kind of an amateurish. Well, I've been training that stuff, not theirs, but just training for 20 years.
Say I highly disagree.
Okay.
So my bullshit meter goes off big time, because if you ask any strength coach worth their weight in salt about GOTA, they're all going to say the same thing. They're all going to tend to agree with me, because I've had these conversations with multiple strength coaches. I try to get into this without trashing anybody or trashing them as a whole, and they may be good coaches, but as far as their belief system, it just doesn't make sense biomechanically. It goes against all the things we know from a biomechanics standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
You can cherry pick pictures of still frame pictures of movements of Tom Brady or Michael Jordan or, in these certain positions and say, well, this is how you're supposed to move. But the reality is there is no one way to move. Your arthropometrics, how your body is built, your skeletal system, will determine to a degree how you can move. There's plenty of ways to squat. There's plenty of ways to deadlift. There's plenty of ways to lunge, to jump. There's probably a range we want to be in with all those things. Just like there's plenty of ways to swing a golf club successfully.
Right.
So I think anytime you start to say there's only one right way to move or one best way to move, my red flags go up in my head, because we know there's not. There's just not. Everybody's built different. You can look at successful sprinters or runners or successful athletes in all areas, and you're going to see different ways of movement. You're going to see different builds, different abilities. You can look at major league pitchers and arm angles, and quarterbacks and arm angles, and golf swings, and runners and sprinters, and all these things that are at the highest level, power lifters, and you're going to see a bunch of different ways. Again, there may be optimization in certain things. There may be certain positions you want to get into, let's say in the golf swing, but there's plenty of ways to get the job done. And I just, like I said, anytime you start pigeonholing movement into one right way, the red flags go up for me.
Fair enough. I just knew you were down not far from New Orleans, and I knew they were there. That I said
a lot. Yeah. So, and maybe I'm a little sour because I have to answer these questions a lot, but I just, I don't agree with much of what they say, of anything. And most of the coaches that I respect, are in agreement with me. That's what I'll say.
Okay. No problem. I want to touch on, you've got an online coaching app or a training series, right? So tell everybody a little bit about that, so they can get online, check you out, and give you a shout out or ring up and use that and get you to help them hit it longer, faster, be in better health.
Yeah. So I have a couple different options. I mean, my main coaching program is the programs are delivered through the Guidry Golf and Sport app. And then around that, they have access to me as a coach. So, they have unlimited messaging access to me. I check in with them week to week, if not day to day. So that basically the best way I can put it is as close as possible as I can make it to in-person training. So It's not here's your program, good luck, you're on your own. I do have some of that for people that maybe don't feel like they need as much of me, or they're experienced, or for whatever reason. I have some options that are more just programs. But most of what I do, or what I try to do, is from the coaching form. So, whether that's video form checks, whether that's, again, habit tracking and us kind of figuring out how to, again, like we talked about, everybody I start with, I do an assessment. I do an assessment call. I do a little bit of a movement mobility assessment on video, but most of it is kind of understanding where they're at, their background, their history, their experiences with training, good and bad, their schedule, their lifestyle. Are they married? Are they single? Do they have kids? How busy their job? And then figuring out how to fit that into their lifestyle. And then as those things change, my job as the coach is to morph and change the program with them, from a progression standpoint, from a, schedule change standpoint, whatever that may be. So it's truly kind of a team effort. I like to coach based on feedback. So I always say it's not a dictatorship. It's not just, I'm going to say, stand up on my, ivory tower and say, you need to do this, you need to do this, or it's not going to work. I'm obviously going to give my advice and guidance and say, this is what I think we should do based on your goals. And then I'm going to take their feedback and input as we go along and maybe morph some changes and figure out a way to make it work best for them. So, I've got different options. I've got month to month, and I've got some more longer term commitment options through that. But I have clients all over the U.S. I've got right now about 8 to 10 international clients. And so, it's been a successful thing. And like I said, I've been able to touch and help people, in areas that I never would believe I'd be able to work with. So that's really the beautiful thing about, the technology, with all the negatives that may come with it. I mean, it allows me to serve way more people than I ever would thought I'd be able to serve.
That's the positive aspect of social media and technology today, that you can help somebody in Iowa, or you can help somebody in South Africa, right? That finds your info, follows you, really likes it, and then reaches out to you, and hey, then you're able to help them. So it's got to make you feel good.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I love it. I love what I do. I've always said, golf, strength training are, they're hugely important to me. And so, the more people's lives I can bring them to, at all ages, at all levels, and golf is, both have gotten me through some low points in my life, some dark times in my life. And so, it's important for me for them to be a part of my life. And so if I can make them a part of others' lives and keep them on the course and keep them playing and performing at the level they want and healthy, and then help them build a lifestyle that's going to keep them doing that for as long as they live. And, not only that, but keep them functional, capable, resilient, harder to kill human beings, keep them able to play with their kids and grandkids and travel and garden or do woodworking or all these things that for the majority of people I work with are pretty close to as important as golf is to them, outside of the guys that are trying to make a living out of it. Those things, the feedback on, hey, I was able to do this, I was able to garden all day without problems is just as important to me as I was able to play 18 holes without back pain, and so that's the beauty of kind of working with human beings is although I specialize in golf and primarily the people I work with, there's a golf goal or component to everything we do. Um, the beauty of it is it's going to make you more capable and more resilient in all aspects of life.
Is there anything that you see trainers or therapists doing, whether it be a new modality, so to speak, or discipline, or a tweak on an exercise that you've incorporated it into your with how you work with people that just blew you away? Or is it just staying to the fundamentals and
Yeah, I mean, I would
modifying as
say
needed?
it's staying to the fundamentals. I mean, it's I've gotten more into single leg stuff over the years. Um, working into multiple planes, but I still, you know, focus on the main movements, the squats, the deadlifts, within that. I would say just kind of looking back on how I've changed over the years, I've definitely got into more speed work, more jumps, throws, slams, that type of thing, and incorporating more of that stuff outside of the pure just strength aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I think people spend too much time on mobility and warm-ups. I program maybe 10 to 15 minutes a day of mobility. The warm-ups of my workouts should take about 10 minutes. And then, so it's you get in, you get moving, move your body, get your heart rate up, and we start moving fast. And then, we start going into our main lifts, and then maybe, we go into some accessory lifts depending on goals or needs. and then maybe we finish with a little heavy core. And that's how most of my workouts are. Basically, they all kind of look similar as far as that layout. The details and how much weight and reps and the variations of everything is what's going to differ from person to person, and how much time we may spend in one area versus another. But, you know, the fundamentals work, the basics work. If you're consistent in the basics, you're going to see progress regardless of everything else you do. So, you know, move your body through a full range of motion, lift heavy, spend some time moving fast, sprint, jump, throw, slam with high intent. I think that's one of the things that golfers make a mistake is they turn our power exercises into endurance exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to just get out of breath, and and some of that kind of maybe can go to CrossFit and some of the things that come with that, where they're doing high rep of movements that are highly skilled or that are really more should be power movements. But again, a lot of good things come from CrossFit. But, I think they feel the need, I've got to be out of breath after doing these medicine ball slams or these medicine ball throws, rather than focusing on each rep being high intent, each rep being everything they got, and gathering yourself and then going again and doing your 3 to 5 reps. And that's it. And I don't care if you're out of breath or not. I care, did you give everything you had into each rep? Were you moving as fast as you can? Were you jumping as high as you can? Were you sprinting as fast as you can? I think that's a big thing to understand with the power training, and even speed training. If you do a speed bench or speed squats or some Olympic lifts, the same kind of principles go. Your goal should be move that bar as fast as you can. So, doing that, daily walks, I've been a huge proponent of, and that's something I put into all my clients' programs. I have basically just a habit checklist, go for your daily walk. Again, it's something I've implemented into my day-to-day, and from a mental health and a physical health standpoint has been huge. And then the basics of nutrition, focusing on protein. If you kind of look at the data and just on the experience, most people underestimate how many calories they take in, and underestimate how many protein they take in, and overestimate how many calories they take in. I think I said that right, but they think they take in more protein than they do, and they think they take in less calories than they do. And so, focusing on, if you want to lose weight, you got to be in a caloric deficit. So big part of that is going to be controlling intake. And for most athletes, especially most active people, I think they probably need more protein than they do. I kind of stick to the around the 1 gram per pound of body weight or per pound of goal body weight, 0.8 to 1 gram, as a goal. And so I think that, you need that to support the muscle and the breakdown and your weight training. And so, and again, it's going to be more satiating. It's going to tend to be less calorically dense, from those types of foods. So you can fill up on things that aren't as high calorie. So there's a lot of benefits to that. So, I'm a big fan of simplicity in my own life. I'm a big fan of simplicity in my coaching, and kind of finding the big rocks, and let's find the easiest way to attack those. And then we can start to build and optimize and get a little more complex.
Is there anything you were certain about, say 5 to 10 years ago, that now isn't true, or that might have been incorrect?
There's things I've done. Hell, I've probably done unstable surface training for the goal of balance for sport. And in fact, I know I have.
Mm-hmm.
So that would probably be the biggest shift as far as, just how outspoken I am against it. Definitely less emphasizing the heavy weight training and understanding, there's a kind of a point of diminishing returns. And while still most people I work with aren't near that level, understanding that, speed and moving fast and power training has probably become more of an emphasis, in my programs than it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Again, I owe a lot of that to kind of things Mike Carroll has done and put out there, and Bill Miller and people like that, where understanding that force production curve and rate of force production and who needs what, and maybe the importance of, as you hit a certain point of strength, getting more strength probably isn't worth the time and energy and effort, and more time maybe needs to be spent on moving fast and the rate of how you develop that force. So I would say, those kind of are things that pop to mind, but my background in physical therapy is very manual. And I've probably put my hands on 5% of the patients I work with. So, from a rehab standpoint, I've become more activity based and exercise based, and really consider myself more of a strength coach in the way I practice than a physical therapist. I don't own ultrasound or stim or anything that in my clinic. I don't have hot packs or ice packs. I mean, those are things people can do at home, and so, again, I want to make the most out of my clients and patients' time. So they come to me, if they're going to spend 30 minutes on hot heat and stim and ultrasound and massage that are really aren't going to move the needle very much, and that only leaves me 30 minutes of doing the things that are. So, you know, uh, I'd rather spend the time doing the things I know that work. And then, look, I'll do some manual, I'll do some soft tissue, I'll do some things if I think it's going to reduce some pain and guarding and fear and allow them to move. But the goal of those is to get them to moving as quickly as possible, so I don't do those anymore.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting. There's a trainer buddy of mine in Charleston, and he came to visit a couple months back, and we were talking about uh, Brandel Chambly and his how he is for the most part against lifting heavy weights, and we were using Rory as an example, and he was telling me that in the training industry is like, okay, well, if he gets to a point where he's doing squats or deadlifts and he's doing so much weight that he loses the force production, and that is he in other words, he has a certain amount of time to do that rep, and if he can't, then the weight is too high, and then you lower the weight until you can get that speed back, or that as you mentioned, the force production. Do you see stuff like that being beneficial in measuring those things to keep your athletes on that steady progression
yeah,
in
and
the
I think
balance of
again,
speed and force?
yeah, and I think again, the higher the level of athlete, the more important that becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, the extreme would be the power lifter, where it really doesn't matter how fast they move the bar in competition. They just have to get it from point A and point B and complete the lift
Right.
with as much weight as possible. So bar speed doesn't play a part in their success. Now, do they use uh, bar speed as a measurement in their training and different, speed lifts and things like that? Yeah, I mean, there's some benefit to that in training, but from a standpoint of purely what do they need, they just need to move as much weight as possible through, a successful lift, a successful range of motion. So they're the extreme. And again, golfers don't need to be at that extreme. So at a point, if you're moving the bar too slow, or if it just takes too much toll on your body from a recovery standpoint to lift X amount of weight, then, yeah, that going for more or staying at that point probably isn't worth it. Or, we need to kind of change the approach where we are maybe focused on less weight and more bar speed and things like that. So again, it times of the year matter. Off season, we're generally going to go higher volume and more strength, and we're going to maybe push the body a little more, smartly. And then as you move towards in season, that's going to change from a volume standpoint, and even how far we're willing to push the body from a weight standpoint. I still feel that in the golf world, that's a rarity. Most golfers I've worked with at all levels don't come very close to that point where they're at that diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean we don't still vary it depending on where they're at and how they're responding, but there's still the goal is to get stronger for most of them. And so theoretically, yes, in the golf world, maybe more than other sports, it's still probably most athletes are not coming close to that point. And so it's just up to you to understand as a coach to, again, it's the athlete in front, someone like, you know, let's say John Rahm or Shane Lowry, they're probably built to handle more weight. So, you can maybe push them a little more from that standpoint where, someone that's 5'10", 140 pounds, you've got to be, you've got to progress that a little differently, even based on their build and what they can handle. And those numbers are going to probably be different. They're going to be different for those two guys at where that level is.
Interesting. Very cool. Where do you see the training therapy industry in 5 years?
I definitely think,
quickly as things are advancing in today's world, I figured
I
5
definitely
years.
think virtual and hybrid and that kind of a more of a less of a, everything has to be in person and in front of you is going to become more and more of a thing. just because, technology is pushing that way. Obviously, COVID kind of forced us into that bit of a model,
Hmm.
even myself, without, really having time to maybe prepare for it. Um, I think that even as like my therapy clients, very rarely do I see someone 3 times a week, even for severe post-surgery things, because uh, I just don't think there's a need for it, and so I support them through my app, so they still have everything they need to do on their own. There's no need if we're going to be doing the same things for a couple of weeks. They don't need to be paying me a copay and come sitting in front of me or paying me cash, really, because I don't take insurance, to come sit in front of me to do the same exercises they could do at home until they're ready to progress. And so, I think that's a problem in rehab, and you know, there's a lot of issues I have with just outpatient physical therapy, but one of them is just this generic of, you run people out of their visits, and they had an ACL and now they're out of their 30 visits their insurance gave them for the year in 2 months, because you've just run them through this mill of doing the same stuff over and over again, and they haven't gotten anywhere, and they're still nowhere near where they need to be to return to play and return to where they need to be. So, I hope, maybe this is just wishful thinking, that we move more into a model of where, you know, away from the medical system, away from, maybe insurance controlling us, which, personally I have done, and more of a, options approach. So, hey, you can't afford to come 3 times a week. Well, here's a cheaper option we can do virtually, or here's a different option where, I have this app you can train through. Maybe you only need to be in front of me once a week. And so, giving patients options and having that ability to still deliver, I feel I still deliver as high a quality product online as I do in person. Um, Still keep the quality there, and I think probably the quality even better sometimes than if they're in front of you 3 days a week. And there's going to be people that still want or need that, and that's fine. I have a few clients that still come to see me 3 days a week because that's what they want, and so for them, that's what works. So I think that's probably the biggest area I see, fitness and health, and especially health rehab moving, is hopefully more into preventative and wellness, and instead of just kind of sick care and getting to people after they're injured or problems, and finding different options to deliver that care to people that don't require them to be in front of you for an hour 3 days a week.
Yeah, I see technology advancing your field astronomically more than it is, let's say, the golf field. Meaning, with what testing they can do now, and the ability for someone like you, or occupational therapy, or surgery, or to pick any portion of the monstrosity that the medical industry is, that the advancements in that have come so far. Um, life-saving surgery, or surgeries now that have a huge impact, where 25 years ago the loss of blood or anything else was going to be severely detrimental with robotic surgery today, or what have you. I think that you guys are accelerating at such a fast rate, and for very good reason. When people talk about technology in golf, I say, yeah, go look at the medical industry, and golf is not even a drop in the bucket. It's not even a drop in the ocean compared to what they're doing in that
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah. I mean, look, we are really good at saving lives, really good at keeping people alive. I don't think our system, and not to say it's better or worse than any other system in any other country, but our system that I've worked in is not very good at preventing stuff. And so, it's our we fed this, the more you do, the more you get paid. So in PT, the more you see a client, the more money you make.
Mm-hmm.
Not always the best thing for the person. In the more imaging you do, the more money you make. The more visits you do, the more money you make. And so, it's kind of fed into the system of doing all this stuff that sometimes is unnecessary or potentially harmful when it doesn't need to be done, and it doesn't have the patient's best interest in mind. So, my whole goal and my shift in the last, as I've gotten into golf and maybe wellness, is I'm trying to get to people before they get into the system and do as much as I can to keep them out. And then if they need it, they need it. Hey, I keep my relationships with doctors and orthos, and even other PTs that might do some things that I don't do. And so if it's needed, it's needed. I'll refer out. I'm going to rule out any red flags. And if there's anything of concern, I'm going to send them out, for further testing or, just to make sure. Um, but my job or my goal is to get them out of the system and keep them out as much as possible. Because once they get in, it's the old, they go to their primary care with back pain and they get some pain meds and maybe some anti-inflammatories and then maybe an x-ray, and then they're sent to a specialist and get an MRI, and now they've got all this problems that they've developed, or that they've been told they have, that may or may not be a problem, and now all they've done for it is pop some pills, and then they come to me 2, 3, 4 weeks after the pain started with a big hill for me to climb as a practitioner. So if I can get to people and keep these people in my contact so they can say, I tell my clients, even my fitness performance clients, you still have access to a physical therapist. Unfortunately in Louisiana, we have direct access for 30 days. So I can treat them for 30 days without them having to get a doctor's referral. So I tell them, look, if something pops up, you call me. You have elbow pain, you have something, I may say, hey, look, I think you need to see your doctor. Or I may say, come in, let me check it out. And 9 times out of 10, it's something we can deal with in-house without right away, get it taken care of without them having to kind of jump through the hoops and spin days and do all these things and then end up back in front of me in 2, 3, 4 weeks with the same problem.
It makes sense. You can streamline that system. Just instead of it going through all that chain to come back to you in the beginning, why not just go right to you to start, and you can potentially eliminate a lot of unnecessary action.
Yeah, I agree. And, a good physical therapist, I think we are in a good position as physical therapy. I don't know we're doing a great job of it, but we're in a good position to kind of be the triage experts of musculoskeletal issues. And a good PT will know what to look for, will know when to refer out, will know what they can handle, and kind of understand that system of, okay, I don't think this is a problem. I'm going to treat them, or, I'm not sure about this. I think they maybe need to go, see their GP or see the specialist and make sure before I start doing anything with them. Some of it is insurance driven. Insurances require you to see your doctor first. Some of it is state law driven still, where there's no direct access. So, there's a lot of hoops to jump through in certain states and certain areas. That's why I don't take insurance, because I don't think anybody that's never had any interaction with my patients should tell me what I can and can't do and how long, how many times I can do it with, or what my time is worth. And so I think that the insurance system, while again beneficial, I've had some heart issues and spent some times in the hospital over the last few years, and I've got some genetic heart issues, and so without insurance, my bill would have been a lot higher. So I think it's great for those type of things, but I think when we get into these kind of lower level, less emergent care things, it tends to create more problems than not.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And there's no doubt. And I've been through the chain that you described: GP, specialist, and then it goes all the way back to the therapist or whoever I should have seen in the first place.
Yeah. So, there's some times where, you go to the GP and something's found out that, the therapist wouldn't have been able to help. I would say that's more the exception than the rule, and so if we train our PTs properly and educate them properly of what to look for and not look for and when to refer out, I think we can be the frontline experts in that area, and save a lot of money and a lot of time on that back end and going in through those, getting into that system and then up getting spit back out where you should have probably started in the first place.
What's something that you believe in, or that or you might coach, that some of your contemporaries might think is crazy?
I don't know. I mean, as far as what I think the majority of good coaches do, I like to think, my values and my coaching is aligned with them. I think maybe more in the rehab standpoint, again, if you want to talk manual therapy and that type of thing, I don't really utilize a lot of it. I mean, that's still pretty big in physical therapy. Dry needling is a big thing that I don't really find is too beneficial for all the hype it gets. There's probably more on the rehab side that I would answer that. And usually it's around modalities and taping and certain things that every now and then a blue moon I'll use if I feel like it's really going to help the client move. But I don't really touch any of those things. On the fitness performance side, I mean, I try to align I've got my values of, you know, doing what I think is best for the client in front of me and not wasting their time and money and not putting them in harm's way. And I think the things I do align with at least most of the coaches I respect and look up to in the field and even in the general field of strength and conditioning. And there's maybe some things we disagree on certain exercises or certain rep schemes or whatever, but it's usually minute things that really don't matter in the end, and they both probably work. They're both going to probably have success.
Mm-hmm.
But I think on the big things, the big topics that I'm outspoken about, or that I, either do or don't do, at least, maybe this is just my echo chamber, but tends to align with the other coaches that, I respect as moral, ethical, high value, knowledgeable coaches.
It's a good thing to have, right?
Yeah.
Hard to
I
argue
think,
with.
yeah, look, I think, when you get into fitness, there's a lot of maybe ethics lacking and really values lacking in it. And again, we can blame social media for some of this and what it kind of forces you to do to feel like you got to sell yourself. But I mean, I think you can sell and market yourself ethically, and with value and with good morals, and not bullshit people and not lie to people and not put stuff out there that just to kind of hook them in, and just be honest and tell the truth. And, if you're outspoken, that's fine. I mean, but I think, you have to, if you feel like what you're doing, and look, there may be people that do things I disagree with that feel this way, that what they're doing is right. But I think some of those people are ignoring a lot of evidence that maybe speaks to what they're doing isn't that right. But I do think there are just a lot of, for lack of a better word, shitty people in fitness. There's a lot. There's just a lot of. I mean, and again, look, it's probably in a lot of other fields too. This is just the field that I have the most experience and contact in. I mean, and I probably shouldn't say a lot, but there just seems to be a fair amount of bullshit artists and used car salesmen in the fitness field. And I think some of it is the easy access to just saying you're a personal trainer without any real actual training or knowledge, or getting your weekend certification and saying you're this expert or that expert without really actually being an expert. All you did was pay some money and take 2 days out of your schedule, and now you've got these letters behind your name, and now all of a sudden you're an expert. And so, there's not a lot of barriers to just saying you're a fitness professional. And so that kind of clouds it, and then from the outside, they may look the same as somebody that's got 30 years of experience and the same letters behind their name.
Yeah, they never advanced and never continued to
Right.
educate
So,
themselves.
it's just, I think, some of it's probably purposeful, some of it's lack of knowledge, some of it's maybe, blinded by their beliefs and the things they spent money on learning. And it's hard to say, well, I spent years and money on this thing that is probably BS, but, I'm invested into it, so I'm kind of stuck in it. There's a lot of reasons maybe why that stuff is out there, but, it's definitely out there.
Anything I should ask you and haven't?
No, I mean, I thought we've covered way more topics than I thought we covered, which is fine. I mean, look, I could talk all day about this stuff, golf, fitness, all these things, and probably get myself in trouble doing some of the things. But I'm a pretty open book. I try to be an open book, good, bad, or otherwise. Um, you know, to everybody, and especially putting myself out there. And look, there's been some situations that I've learned from in some of those, the way I put stuff out there, and that's fine. I think we're always should be growing and learning in all aspects of our life. But look, I've enjoyed the conversation. I've enjoyed all the topics. And like I said, I could talk about this for days.
Well, I'll have to have you back on. We'll keep talking about some things, but before we go, I want to hit the emergency 9, the rapid fire. If you got a few more minutes left.
No, go for it.
All right, cool. let's say that you got to really practicing your game and you got really good and you made the Ryder Cup and they do your walk up song to the first tee nowadays. What song would you have them play?
Oh, that would be Notorious B.I.G. Juicy.
That'd get them going, wouldn't it? Let's see. With your education, you're obviously very well read. What was the last book that you read?
The last book I read was actually The Match, which is God, who's the guy that wrote it? So it's about a match between I think it's Byron Nelson, Ben Hogan, Ken Venturi, and I forget the other
Oh,
amateurs.
Cypress Point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So not necessarily a knowledge book, but I've actually read it before, and I just went back. I read it like 4 or 5 years ago, and went back and read it. I guess about a month ago I finished it. But I mean, I love the book. It goes obviously it's an intriguing story, but going into the background of all the players and other players of the time, it's a very interesting read to me.
Mm-hmm. I think wasn't it pretty close till the very end?
Yeah,
Went down to the wire, last hole or
yeah, I
two.
think so. Yeah.
Let's see. If there was a movie made about your life, what actor is playing your role?
Phew, that's a good question. I don't know. Uh I mean, it'd have to be someone like in shape and good looking. So, maybe someone with a little more hair than me than I currently
Well,
have.
that knocks the Rock out.
Yeah. So, he's a little bigger than mine. So, maybe someone like let's say a Brad Pitt in his heyday,
There you go.
someone like that. That seems like a good choice.
All right. Let's see. Strangest thing in your golf bag.
Strangest thing in my golf bag is, I just cleaned it out, so that probably would have been a better answer before that because there was a lot of random stuff in there.
Well, then we'll go when you cleaned it out. What was the strangest thing in
So
that
I
bag?
will say this. So this is maybe not the strangest thing, but I changed bags, I guess about 3 or 4 months ago, maybe a little longer. I went on a trip to Whistling Straits. And so, we were walking, so I switched to a walking bag. Well, or a lighter bag. And so there was some stuff rattling around the bottom of my bag, pulled my clubs out, and I dumped it out, and I had two rangefinders that were in there that I'd obviously lost at some point along the way. But I had no idea they were sitting in the
It's
bottom
a
of my
chance
bag.
of two of them ending up in the same spot.
So yeah, so now at that point, I think I gave one to a friend, but I had three rangefinders at that point. They all still worked, but yeah. So maybe that's finding two rangefinders in the bottom of my bag was probably the strangest thing.
That is pretty strange. I agree with you on that one. Let's see. If you weren't a therapist and a trainer, you would have been a what?
Yeah, I'd love to say a professional athlete, but basketball was my sport growing up. I played it through high school, and then at 5'10" and 150 pounds, as a senior in high school, I realized like that was probably the end of my basketball career. Um, I like working with wood, so outside of golf, like I don't do as much as I like, so maybe some kind of woodworking or carpentry or something like that.
Mm-hmm. If you walk into a casino, what's the first thing you're playing?
I'm not probably sports betting now that it's legal. So, they're legal here. So I'm not a big gambler. I'm not a games player. Like if I go, I'm generally just having a few drinks and watching my friends lose money at blackjack or craps or something. But I usually go straight to the sports book now, which gets me in enough trouble. But so I'm not. I mean, if I play anything, it's probably blackjack. I mean,
Okay.
that's probably the only game I've ever played in a casino.
What was your favorite subject in school?
I was a fan of the sciences, so like biology, obviously, anatomy, things like that. Those were all my favorite subjects. I hated math. One of the big reasons I went into physical therapy is because it had the least amount of math prerequisite. So it kind of worked out. It had a lot of biology and anatomy and a lot of math. So, those were definitely my favorite subjects.
All right. Who on any tour in the world is the best physical specimen in golf?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of them nowadays. Just from a natural I mean, you got to put Dustin Johnson up there just from his natural build and abilities and ability to move. Um, you know, from a what he's done to himself, obviously you can't question Bryson as far as just his physicality and his strength and his power.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the fact that he competed in that long drive and I think finished 7th or 8th
Yeah, that was pretty impressive.
against guys that's all they do. I mean, for me, that's an impressive thing to still perform high at a sport and then go to similar but different sport from the intent standpoint and be able to compete at that level and goes to show you what he's done with his body and his swing speed. I would put those goes, the way Rory moves, his natural, his hip speed and the way he moves his hips, probably, a once in a lifetime, physical ability. Watching him swing a driver is a thing of beauty. I mean, Tiger, even everything he went through and maybe a lot of the wrong things he did. I think he was probably the first real physical specimen, and the changes he made from a skinny kid to, bulking up and still changing his swing 4 or 5 times and
Mm-hmm.
still winning at every change he made, even, good, bad, or otherwise, from a ability standpoint and just the ability to, go out and perform at a high level. And, his cuts made streak will probably never be broken. That's, you look at the guys today that go out and shoot 20 under and win a tournament and then miss the cut the next week. And then to see what Tiger did on that standpoint, week in and week out, performing at that level, I think, that's one of the most impressive things to me in the sport of golf.
Yeah, there's some records that are untouchable, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
you never want to say
now,
never, but there's a few of them that are, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I'd go into a casino and put a lot of money on that it doesn't get broken.
Mm-hmm. That one, Byron Nelson's 11 straight.
Yes.
What was the one in baseball? The consecutive hit streak. Was it
Ted
DiMaggio
Williams?
or Ted Williams? I can't
I
remember
think
how many
Ted
games
Williams,
it was.
yeah. 52 or 53 games, something like
And
that.
I think that Paul Mahler was the closest. I think he got to like 35. I mean, that's still 16
Yeah.
to 20 short of the records. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some that are. Will Chamberlain's 100 points in one game. Just some stuff that it's good luck. You want
Yeah,
you just put it on your wall and tape it up there as a kid. Knock yourself out. I hope you get it.
Hey, look, nothing wrong with trying to get it, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I agree. There's just some things that will probably never be touched.
Last one. For the golf world, who's the GOAT?
I'm going to say Tiger. I think it's tough to argue against generation to generation. If you look at the numbers, actually, obviously, Jack has more majors. I think had Tiger maybe made some better decisions in his life, I think he would have easily surpassed that number.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think his peak and his range of his peak was just so much higher and longer than anybody else. I mean, his good was better than anybody else's good at their best. So
yes, I would agree.
I while I can understand arguments for some other players, you want to talk Hogan and what he did after his accident and Byron Nelson, or you go into different generations, I think it's really hard to kind of argue generation to generation. But like, if you're asking me, I'm going to say Tiger.
It's a fair answer, and I think Tiger, and it probably has to do with generation, as you mentioned, the age of who's been on the show. Usually anybody that's, I'll say, well, right around probably 40 to 50 is the cutoff. So if they more or less grew up with Tiger or was somewhat in that era, then they go on with Tiger. If they were 50 plus, they go on with Jack. Even though some 50 pluses have even said Tiger, but but everybody has said something similar to you that went and expanded upon it and gave a reason why.
I think if you take in just growth of the game and growth of the purses and things like that, outside of just what he did as an athlete and as a golfer, performance wise, I mean, for me, that goes into it as well as, this game's at that level is a much different game in how it's played. And even just, how those guys can make a living now, I think, thanks to Tiger.
Yeah. I think Tiger was like a combination of Palmer and Nicklaus. And
Yeah,
how he
yeah,
grew the
I
game
would
like
agree.
Palmer. And nobody grew the game as much as Tiger and Arnold Palmer. I think there's
Yes,
no
yeah.
arguing that. And then his accomplishments rival the argument is him and Nicholas. But I think most people would probably agree that what two people grew the game more than anybody else, and everybody would say Tiger and Arnie.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't argue with that either.
Um, what do you anything coming up that you want to tell people about? Are you speaking somewhere? You got a book coming out or something interesting?
I am in the stages of working on a book. I'm not a writer. If you read any of my tweets, you know my spelling and grammar is my weak point. So right now, I've kind of got the content. I'm just organizing it and then getting close to the next step of like editors and all this that I'm still kind of figuring out what the processes are with that. So that's kind of my next big project. I don't really have a time frame. I'm hoping maybe by the end of this year to have it out maybe for Christmas time or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just going to be a general, the title's becoming a lifelong golfer. So, it's going to have just some, things I've learned, the generalities of how to improve swing speed and health and, tapping into, what to do at different ages, whether you're a junior or senior or, it's more of kind of hopefully will be a book for everybody. It won't be super in depth. Let's say if you're a coach or you're a high level golfer willing to get that edge, but it's going to be more for the masses of just educating them on, how to best spend their time to become a higher performing, healthier, golfer that can play the game there for the entirety of their life.
Very cool.
Outside of that, I've got my online coaching program, obviously my in person for, locally to me here in the Mandeville, New Orleans, Louisiana area. I have a couple programs I just put out or that are more just programs. So, they're kind of lower cost things that don't have as much access to me. I've got a 12-week program, which is just basically a 12-week full training program with the goal of improving strength and speed. That you can find. You can go to the links on any of my social media and find it, or you can go to my website, Guidry Golf and Sport, and find it. And then I just put out a 6-week mobility program that is basically an all-encompassing. It's a daily mobility program that kind of gives you everything you need to improve your mobility and movement as a golfer. As well as some special things on improving back speed, swing length, and separation, and just general health and wellness as well. So the goal of that is just to kind of instill the habits of moving daily with some purpose, around benefiting the golf swing. Again, that can also be found on the links of my social media on my website.
And tell just, and I'll have, as I do all that with every guest, all your social media handles and link to your website and everything. But go ahead and tell everybody your Twitter, Instagram, Facebook too. I know you're on Twitter and Instagram because I follow you on
Yeah,
both.
I'm on Facebook, so obviously I have my personal page, John Paul Guidry, and then Guidry Golf and Sport page on there. Instagram, Guidry Golf and Sport Performance. And I just changed my Twitter handle to Guidry Golf or Fit, I think. It used to be Barbells and Birdies, but I changed it to Guidry Golf Fit. So, or if you search my name, Dr. JP Guidry, you can find that as well. But I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to see me getting arguments, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to be more positive, but I see stuff and then I can't bite my tongue.
It
But
is fun. I mean, that was one thing that caught my eye that I said I got to get him on. I got to send an invite to him because but you do it respectfully. I mean, you're passionate about your opinion, and it's very well backed up. And it helps people who aren't in that part of the industry to, like myself, and hear you and whoever you're going to disagree with, because then there's a back and forth and people can learn from that. So
yeah, and that's what I hope. I used to. I'm divorced now, but I used to tell my ex-wife, like, I don't argue for something unless I'm pretty sure I'm right. So
that's what I tell a lot of people.
I feel like if I'm going to really put something out there, I'm pretty confident that, I've got enough evidence behind it to it's not just me saying words. There's stuff backing it up. And look, I mean, there's been time where I've been wrong. There's been times when I've been called out and been presented better evidence to say, okay, well, I'll look into this. Maybe I'm not right. And so, I like to think I'm willing to be open-minded if there's enough evidence to change that. But, generally the things I'm outspoken about is usually there's no evidence to back it up, and it's usually just words and opinions. And look, I know the chances of me changing anybody's opinion, it's kind of like arguing politics or something, the chances of me changing the person's opinion I'm having that argument with are probably slim to none. But my hope is maybe someone that doesn't have an opinion or that doesn't have the knowledge sees it, and then they can kind of take that, at the very least, do their own research, if anything.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. And the fact that you would say, I've got to let me check more on this, or I could be wrong. I mean, that's fair enough. I think that's a fair thing to say, as opposed to just ramping it up and just arguing to argue, because you can't admit that you might have made a mistake, or that someone else might know something, and not just you in particular, but anybody out there. I think that cesspool of Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it can become a problem.
Yes,
it's just
can become a problem quickly.
So I'm probably will always be outspoken against certain things, especially if, I feel like there's enough information that I'm confident in what I'm saying to back that up. But, I'm trying to be better about how I present that, and maybe just better about blocking and ignoring and that type of thing. Because, I can waste some time having conversations with people that is probably time better spent on other things. So, I'm doing it more from that basis than anything. But, I like being on social media. Like I said, I've met people, made friends, made contacts, learned a lot from social media. Look, it's got its negatives, and I have my downfalls with it, and getting sucked into it more than I like to. But there's a lot of negatives, but I'm trying to be better at, and I think a lot of people can kind of take from this. And Mike Carroll actually put out a post, something about this, just kind of posting and not paying attention to the comments, or not arguing, not wasting your time. And so something I'm trying to be better at is just putting the stuff out there, trying to educate, make my point. If someone wants to have a civilized conversation, or a reasonable argument at the very least, I don't mind that. But, you can kind of get into things and realize where it's going to go pretty quickly within that. But, I've met a lot of people and had contact with a lot of people in and out of golf that I would have never had it not been for social media. So, I'm trying to be grateful and focused on the positives of it as I try to get better at how I utilize it.
It's a good way to do it. I mean, you using it the way it was probably intended to be used.
Yeah. I think the powers that be may have kind of poisoned that, and humanity itself. But I think you can find, if you can weed through all the bad and the negative, you can find a way to positively use it and build good relationships.
Okay, that's what I've been using it for. I would have never known to ask you on the show if I wouldn't have been on there. So I try to stay quiet. Once in a while, I'll spout off, but I've learned to try to do it respectfully. And the people that I know, I'll message them and say, hey, I hope that didn't come off in a bad way. I wasn't trying it to be, but
look, sometimes it's hard. Look, it's hard to be sarcastic. It's hard to, put some context into things in a short amount of characters, without face-to-face interaction or inflection in your voice and things like that. So, I'm kind of a dry, sarcastic person by nature, which doesn't fit social media very well. It's hard to read that stuff sometimes. So I've had to kind of maybe explain things to certain people and be like, hey, look, this is how I meant it, But it's usually always ended up all good. But it's hard to carry over some of that personality into that, when it doesn't read that well.
Cool. Well, people need to check you out. Again, the links will all be in the summary. If you want to hit it longer, you want to feel better, play better, all that stuff, check out Doc Guidry's site. Doc, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we're going to have to do this again.
I'd love to. I really appreciate you. I'm grateful you having me on, giving me this opportunity to talk.
Anytime. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.com. golf.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up again on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's Paradigm, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353.